I will call to order the October 6, 2020 meeting of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Hartman?
Here.
Mr. Adam?
Here.
Mr. Lavanino?
Here.
Chair Hart?
Here. At this time, please stand and join the board in pledging allegiance to the flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item of business is approval of the minutes from the September 22nd and the September 29th special meeting. Is there any discussion? I'll now entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
Aye.
Mr. Lavanino?
Aye.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
CEO Miyasato, is there a CEO report today?
Yes, there is. Chair Hart and board members. This week is National Fire Prevention Week. There's a resolution on your honorary resolutions today. And so with us, we have Chief Hartwig to talk a little bit more about fire prevention.
Chief Hartwig, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair, Ms. Miyasato, members of the board. I'm going to make it brief this morning, but wanted to give you a little bit of history. Calvin Coolidge in 1925 proclaimed this week every year Fire Prevention Week. So we've been doing it for a long time. And I'm reminded this year especially that the prevention tips don't always align locally the very best. It's serving up fire safety in the kitchen this year. That's the national campaign, and as much as I wish it was Wildfire Safety Week and month and year every year, it's not. We can do that as well. But cooking fires, kitchen fires are the number one leading cause of injury, death, and destruction in the country annually. And unattended cooking fires are the leading cause of that. So we wanted to draw everybody's attention to that specifically this year. There's great information out there if you, whatever your preferred Google search is, but the NFPA, which leads our efforts every year, has great information, nfpa.org. Of course, sbcfire.com also has great information as well. So we want to encourage everybody this year, especially as we start getting into holiday cooking, to be very especially vigilant as we do that. And then if I could, as I leave you, just talk specifically about the need to be extra vigilant this year for wildfire safety until we get that first rain, and we're going to be pressed this year. And so our hearts go out to all those who have suffered this year in a historic fire season. We're not out of the woods yet, and let's be safe until then. You've seen the press releases. We've had two just recently where we found the cause of the two of the local fires we've had, and they were both careless. One was a target shooting, and one was simply clearing brush off their land and creating a spark. And it's so dry right now, especially at this time of the year, until we get that first rain and the wet season here in Santa Barbara County. Thank you, Ms. CEO and board, for recognizing Fire Safety Week, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And I see we have Kelly Hubbard, too.
Thank you. Good morning, Supervisors and Chair. Just a great opportunity to remind everyone about readysbc.org. And so information about preparedness and readiness on that website, as well as where you can register to receive notifications from local government agencies if there was to be a wildfire or any other emergency of any significance. And so if you go to that website, readysbc.org, can sign up, register for alerts. Also, if you signed up quite a while ago, I'd encourage residents to go back. You can re-log in, check your contact information, make sure you have your right cell phone number in there, the right email address. If you've moved, update your address, those types of things. If you've registered through text by Nixle, Again, encourage you to go to the website and put in your additional information, because when you register through Nixle, that's only your zip code, and we don't get your other pieces of information on how to get a hold of you.
Thank you for that. That's so important. Folks can't be contacted. They can't be alerted. Supervisor Williams.
Well, I'm off theme also this year, though, and have, like many residents, have wildfire on the brain. So I just wanted to ask you, we've had some Sundowner events. I want you to just tell us about the upstaffing that you've been doing during those events so that people understand that we're more prepared than ever. We've gotten off lightly this year thus far, but we're not counting on that.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Supervisor. We, on any planned fire event, and I say planned fire event, but fire weather, specifically as we are noticed out of the National Weather Service, local weather service office, we will reach into our budget and upstaff at our cost often, but usually we actually get some funding from Cal OES, governor-approved pre-position funding, as well as the state fire department. Cal Fire provides some funding for us to upstaff in the state responsibility areas, which are really the whole front country, the valley, and then the back country as well. So we have a lot of resources available to us. We position those strategically. Sometimes those are resources from out of the area. Very often they're our own operational area resources, not just from the county fire department, but from Carpinteria, Montecito, Santa Barbara, Lompoc, and Vandenberg, and then Santa Maria as well.
Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to all the firefighters. This has already been an amazingly demanding season. And just to remind people, our practices in daily life are really important. Things we can do the rest of the year we can't now. I think we're quite educated on defensible space around our homes. We have a new ordinance we approved this year, or early last year, for a 10-foot right-of-way clearance. But I think the next phase of education is people understanding what some of the causes, the behaviors that they engage in. And they're not unlawful, it's just you got to think. And what the potential repercussions are and liabilities. I serve on the Fire Safe Council board, and we do have a piece on the website that looks at the past fires and what the causes are. At some point in the near future, I hope to pull those out and make an educational piece, because I can't emphasize how important this is. I had a neighbor who announced she was going to be target shooting, and then I looked and said, maybe you shouldn't do that. None of us knew. So this is really, really significant, I believe. Thank you. And I know you're starting, it takes a while after the investigations to find out what really was the cause, and that kind of gets buried, and our chief has been trying to focus more attention on that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor Hartman. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Adam.
Yeah, I was just telling Supervisor Lavanino, I don't know how many rounds I've fired around dry grass personally. Certainly in the thousands, tens of thousands of rounds, and I've never seen anything like that. And I always wonder if somebody that gets, it seems like there's an inordinate amount of fires that get attributed to shooting, and I just wonder if they weren't really smoking when they were out shooting and dropped an actual ash on the ground, because I just never seen anything like it. And of course I don't smoke while I'm shooting, so maybe that's why I never light a fire.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Any other comments? Is that the end of your report, CEO Miyasato?
Yes, that's the end of the report.
Okay. Madam Clerk, are there any announcements or changes to our agenda today?
Chair Hart and members of the board, yes, I have a couple quick announcements this morning. First, I just like to remind members of the public of our alternative method of public comment for our board meetings. If you turn to page 2 of our agenda today, if you'd like to make a public comment on an item on today's agenda or a general public comment, please call 805-568-2240. State your name, your phone number, and which item you'd like to speak on, and we will call you at the appropriate time. I'd like to remind the public to please make every effort to be available and mute all streaming devices once it is your turn to speak. and that number will be scrolling on the top of your screen momentarily. Additionally, I have a couple announcements and changes to our agenda today. Administrative item number 15 is from County Council. It is to consider recommendations regarding an agreement for professional legal services with Rutten and Tucker, LLP, for eminent domain proceedings and litigation, and there is a 4/5 vote required on this item. And we have a slight revision to recommendation A, to remove the County of Santa Barbara and replace with the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. This should read as follows. Recommendation A, approve, ratify, and authorize the chair to execute the agreement for professional legal services between the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District and Attorney Douglas Dennington of the law firm Rutten and Tucker, LLP, from September 10th, 2020 through June 30th, 2022, for a total not to exceed amount of $150,000. Additionally, I have an announcement on administrative item A17 from County Council. It is to consider recommendations regarding a revenue agreement to provide legal services between the County of Santa Barbara and Beach Erosion Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment Beacon. And we have a request from staff to withdraw this item on today's agenda. Additionally, we have a request from the department to withdraw departmental item number 2. This is from Public Works, Board of Directors, Flood Control and Water Conservation District, and General Services. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding a resolution of necessity for a temporary construction easement for the Lower Mission Creek APN 037-245-017, number 003784, owned by Reginald E. Drew, Jr. in the first district, and there is a 4/5 vote on this item as well. And as noted earlier, staff requests withdrawal of this item, and all of our previously mentioned changes to today's agenda have been distributed to the board and made available to the public online.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, Supervisor Williams has a brief announcement.
Well, on Sunday, September 6th, we lost a son of the county family. Nicholas Nick Haro lost his life due to injuries from a tragic vehicle accident. He was 23 years old. Nick's parents are both longtime county employees. His mother, Lori, has been a county employee since 1999 and currently manages the Child Welfare Services Division of Social Services. That's a group of folks I consider heroes. Nick's dad, Bill, has worked for the county since the year 2000 and is currently a maintenance leader in public works. Nick was young, adventurous, and brave, and had a big heart. He grew up in the community of Orcutt, attending local schools and exploring any parks, hills, and hidden trails he could find. As a child, he loved nothing more than to ride his bike or scooter with his friends through the neighborhood, building bike ramps, dreaming of his future, and enjoying life. Nick loved the outdoors. He loved to hunt and fish. Almost every day after work and on weekends, he could be found fishing with his friends on local lakes and waterways. He cherished annual fishing trips with his father, brother, and other family members. Nick worked as a HVAC technician, who are the foot soldiers of our energy-efficient future. He was dedicated to his job and often said he would like to one day buy the company from the owner when he retired. He also dreamed of purchasing land and building his own home on a farm. In addition to his dad, Bill, and mom, Lori, Nick is survived by his siblings, Anthony and Ariana, his grandmother, Sharon, his uncles and aunts, Eduardo and Gabriela, Kenneth and Jennifer, John and Debbie, and Fred and Nellie, as well as numerous cousins. An outdoor memorial celebration of Nick's life was held on October 3rd in Orcutt. His family will treasure all the memories, big and small, from the joy Nick brought to those around him. I know that we all feel a heartfelt sense of loss and sympathy when any person that comes from the county family passes away, and that we reach out in our hearts for Bill and Lori and all of the Haro family and for Nick's many friends, and ask that we adjourn today in memory of Nick.
Thank you, Supervisor Williams. And our condolences to the Haro family. Which brings us to our next item on is approval of the administrative agenda. Do any board members wish to pull any items on the administrative agenda? I think we have already requests to pull A1, A9, A11, A21, and A22. Are there others? All right. Are there any requests from the public beyond those?
Chair Hart and members of the board, yes, we have requests, as previously mentioned, on A1 and A21.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please read item A1 into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, administrative item number 1 is sponsored by Supervisor Williams. It is to adopt a resolution proclaiming the second Monday of October 2020 as Indigenous Peoples Day in Santa Barbara County. And we have Kenneth Kahn requesting to speak on this item.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Chairman Kahn.
Excellent. Good morning, Chairman Hart and members of the board. Thank you for making it possible for us to take part in this hearing remotely and safely. I am Kenneth Kahn, Chairman of the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. Thank you so much for recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, and thank you for identifying the contributions of all Chumash people. Santa Barbara County encompasses a large portion of Chumash Aboriginal territory. Today, our neighbors and our friends walk where our ancestors once walked. We enjoy the same beautiful coastline our elders once fished, and lush hillsides our elders hunted and gathered. As most of you know, the history of this land was not always peace and beauty. Chumash are people of perseverance. From first contact, our ancestors endured the Spanish period, Mexican period, and dark determination policies of the American period. Today, Indigenous people across the nation still suffer from the impacts of colonization. Lands totally lost or reduced to small reservations, Native American history improperly represented in schools, serious inequities in Indian territories that are the result of extreme poverty, likened to third world countries. Your recognition of the many contributions and challenges of Native people is good medicine, and it is the healing that we need. The Chumash people are still here today, and we will continue to be here for time immemorial. I thank you for taking the time to honor the Indigenous people of our community, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chairman Kahn. Supervisor Williams?
Well, I just wanted to thank Chairman Kahn for highlighting this. I've always felt, even before I came to the board, that this is an important day to commemorate and sponsor this resolution in the legislature and now here, because I do think that it's relevant for today to remember our history, both its good and its bad, and should affect how we relate with one another, the empathy and understanding that we try to bring in relating with one another.
Thank you, Supervisor Williams. The next item on the administrative agenda is item A9. Would the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, administrative item number 9 is from Behavioral Wellness. It is to consider recommendations regarding a service agreement with Crestwood Behavioral Health, Inc., Champion Healing Center, Mental Health Rehabilitation Center, MHRC, fiscal years 2020 through 2024.
I think Supervisor Lavanino, you asked to pull this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did. And I just wanted to highlight this. I think one of my first conversations with Dr. Gleghorn when she got here was her speaking about her vision to bring IMD beds to Santa Barbara County. And for the public, these facilities provide assessment, diagnosis, treatment, supportive services to people in crisis. we've had a history of having to send people in a time of probably a time of crisis in their life and their family lives. We've had to send them to Kern, Shasta, and Santa Clara counties for treatment. I just wanted to highlight today, appreciate Dr. Gleghorn's vision. This approach to treatment with tiered, now that we're going to have a more tiered approach to treatment, I think that's an approach that's more conducive to better outcomes for the patient and also much more cost efficient for the county. I also want to recognize that a vision also needs guidance, and so I want to thank CEO Miyasato and Terry Mosnisich for their guidance in moving this forward. And also, a vision needs expert legal advice. And so I want to thank County Counsel, Mr. Gazzoni, and all of your team, and also the team from General Services. This was a huge undertaking to make this happen. And the county's in a better place today, and I think all those families who have people in their family that are struggling with mental illness, this is a huge victory today and a huge step forward into progressing into the future. So just want to thank all those people.
Thank you very much for highlighting this item, Supervisor Lavanino. This is a really important moment, and I see that Dr. Gleghorn is available. Dr. Gleghorn, please, would you tell us more about this important project?
Certainly. I want to echo Supervisor Lavanino's thanks to all the county partners that have worked with us to make this possible. It has been a long journey, and we are ready to begin services this month. We are going to be bringing a number of clients who are in far-flung counties at other MHRC facilities back home, with the hope that being closer to their families and local services and local housing resources, et cetera, that they'll be able to become more independent and return into the community functioning well and with the support of our resources. So again, thank you to all who have contributed to this progress, and we look forward to opening.
Thank you to Dr. Gleghorn, and thank you for your leadership on this really important issue. Without your persistence and commitment and determination, this day wouldn't be possible, so we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this item? Okay, let's go to Supervisor Williams.
Well, just that I hope this is something that that the public realizes is a struggle even before Dr. Gleghorn got here. I mean, this has been a discussion for 20 years, and to see the county make so much progress on adequately caring for folks, mentally ill folks, it's really inspiring, and it's a sea change.
I know that's a view for everybody on the board. The next item is item A11. Would the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart, members of the board, administrative item number 11 is from Community Services. It is to consider recommendations regarding the California Department of Conservation Local and Regional Planning Grant Program, TERRA account.
Supervisor Adam?
Yeah, my main problem is in the summary text, is summarized by the summary text, point number 4, develop an integrated natural and working lands component to the county's 2030 climate action plan. I think that is unnecessary in the extreme and will probably be misguided and misused and be detrimental to everybody that's trying to work the land and understands what they're doing, and the people that try to put that together undoubtedly won't.
So why don't we have a separate motion for this item so Supervisor Adam can vote against it. Would somebody like to make this motion on A11?
Chair Hart, I move approval.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. Any more discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
No.
Mr. Lavanino?
Abstain.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1-1.
Okay, thank you. The next item is item A21. Would the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, administrative item number 21 is from Fire. It is to consider recommendations regarding an acceptance of a non-cash vehicle donation of $57,000 from the Santa Barbara Firefighters Alliance to the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, and there is a 4/5 vote required on this item, and we have one request to speak, and that's Susan Petrovich.
Thank you, Ms. Petrovich, for being involved in the Firefighters Alliance and for this wonderful contribution. Look forward to hearing your comments.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Susan Petrovich. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Welcome.
I am the president of the Santa Barbara Firefighters Alliance. The Alliance is a nonprofit charitable organization formed with one goal: to raise money to purchase equipment and services requested by fire department crews of the city of Santa Barbara and the county of Santa Barbara. With strained budgets, our services provide state-of-the-art equipment that wouldn't otherwise be included in a budget. But we don't just go out and buy the equipment. The firefighters tell us precisely what they need, and the fire chiefs must approve the appropriation. Ironically, even before COVID hit, we had purchased for the fire department washable personal protective gear for the firefighters because they never know exactly what they will encounter when they go to a scene. So this is lightweight, washable, but designed for safety. The services that we provide also include confidential counseling that doesn't go through any governmental agency, so it's completely private. No information goes into the firefighter's file, and it's a service for their families as well. Everyone's been under a lot of strain, but our firefighters and their families have borne a lot more strain than I think any of us. We're here today to ask you to approve our donation of this truck. We first purchased the remote command center trailer to serve as an office with laptop stations and places a table where the crews can sit around and discuss strategy. Otherwise, just basically have an office right there at the fire or the incident if it's not a fire. It's a huge trailer, though, and it needs a honkin' big truck to haul it. So that's what this truck will do, and we request that you approve it. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Petrovich, and thank you again for your leadership with the Firefighters Alliance. We're really grateful, and I know that our first responders and firefighters are very appreciative of this additional asset. Supervisor Williams, did you have a comment? Okay.
Just wanted to give my personal thanks to all the folks at the Alliance that work to raise this money, and that you'd be do it to make sure that we all are safer. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Petrovich. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. The next item is item A22. Would the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, administrative item number 22 is from General Services. It is to consider recommendations regarding the Buellton Senior Center 25-year lease agreement, file number 999, and this is in the 3rd District.
Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you, Chair Hart. I just wanted to thank the fire department and especially the fire chief and the staff at General Services who have facilitated this agreement. It is a long-term lease for the Buellton Senior Center that enables them to raise funds and do planning and renovation. They are a major community, the heart of the community in Buellton, and they provide meals for many, many grateful people, and especially during this time of COVID, they have been indispensable. So very appreciative of this, and thank everybody who made it possible.
Thank you, Supervisor Hartman. Do we need a motion for the withdrawal of item A17 and D2?
Chair Hart and members of the board, if the maker of the motion on the balance could just add that to their motion.
All right.
be
And
great.
could we get a motion for the balance of the consent calendar or the administrative agenda?
So moved.
Motion's been made.
So we have A15 with the recommendation A, slight change from Santa Barbara County to flood control as the clerk read into the record, and then A17 withdrawal. So I would second that motion.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
Aye.
Mr. Lavanino?
Aye.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Which brings us to the public comment section of the agenda. It's time for members of the public to speak to the board on matters that are not on our agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on items not on today's agenda?
Chair Hart and members of the board, we have no requests to speak in general public comment.
Thank you. Which brings us to department item number 1. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Yes, and Chair Hart, members of the board, prior to moving on to item number 1, just for organization's sake, can we please get a motion on the withdrawal of departmental item number 2? This is previously read into the record, but this is from Public Works, Board of Directors, Flood Control, and Water Conservation District and General Services. It was a hearing to consider recommendations regarding a resolution of necessity for a temporary construction easement for the Lower Mission Creek, APN 037-245-017, number 3784, owned by Reginald E. Drew, Jr., 1st District. And this item, we received a withdrawal memo this morning from the department requesting to withdraw it from today's agenda.
Is there a motion to withdraw this item from the agenda?
So moved.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
Aye.
Mr. Lavanino?
Aye.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And that brings us to department item number 1. Would you please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart, members of the board, departmental item number 1 is from the County Executive Office. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding a coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 update.
Welcome, Dr. Del Reynoso.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Today's briefing topics will include the usual Santa Barbara County COVID-19 data and an in-depth look at the blueprint for a safer economy, going over our anticipated status, as well as reiterating our recent health officer order amendment, introducing to you in a little bit more detail the health equity metrics, as well as having an in-depth briefing on the Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID-19 Response Task Force, as per your request in a previous meeting. And we will end with school waivers. COVID-19 by the numbers in Santa Barbara County, we have cumulative case count of 9,319, cumulative recovered cases 9,082, and we have 122 active cases. This means that there are still 122 infectious cases in our community. We have 23 currently hospitalized, and a total of 115 deaths, which makes that death rate at 1.2%. Over the past 15 days, with the 7-day rolling sum of new cases by areas, for the most part, we are continuing to see decreases in the majority of our areas. We are seeing 4 upticks in primarily the North County. We are seeing an increase in Santa Maria, in Orchid, and in the unincorporated North County. South County, we are seeing an uptick in the Montecito, Carpinteria area. Over the past...
Can we put that a little bit in context? We had 2 last
Correct.
week, so
I only know this because, in in elections, you have to deal with a lot of statistical work. When you have an N that's almost zero, then you're going to have large fluctuations. And so people have looked at the numbers in South County unincorporated all summer long, because either to draw their own conclusions of a 200% drop or a 100% rise. Well, when the N has fluctuated between 2 and 15, you're going to always have large rises or large falls because the sample size is so small.
That is true, but I didn't want to be not transparent by stating that there was an increase. And with the hospitalization over the past 2 weeks, we see a range of census from 18 to 26, but overall beginning number to end number with no change. Per Supervisor Adams' request, I've included 2 slides. This is the daily hospitalized cases since April 29th through October 3rd. And I want to point out that the bulk of our high census was in the mid 80s within the early part of the summer, in the July and early part of August, and we are seeing a decrease in hospital census overall. This is the second new graph. This describes the COVID deaths by week of death. So we have the Russ line describing the cumulative deaths due to COVID in our county, and that stands at, I just shared, 115. And with the blue bar graphs below showing the number of deaths by the week that it occurred. And so we did see in also midsummer in July 19th, 12 deaths, and early part of August, 11 deaths. Those are the single highest weeks with deaths.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam.
Okay, Dr. Del Reynoso, I'm going to be bipolar with you. I love your chart on page 6. I think that's a fantastic representation of how we've gone over the curve. And I don't know if we flattened the curve or the curve took care of itself, but it is what it is, and there it is graphically represented in front of us. And the only real problem I have is we started about a month late, and maybe there wasn't any cases. Is April 29th the first case date?
You know, Supervisor Adam, I am not sure about that. I know that our first case was March 15th, but I don't recall when our first hospitalized case may be, and that's something that I can check with our EPI team.
Well, I'm going to bet that was probably a hospitalization, because at that time I don't think we were doing much testing, and speculative testing. And I think that the way people came to our attention was they were admitted, and so that may have been there may have been a few cases before that, so the curve isn't exactly complete, but it's substantially complete, and I thank you for that. That's a great representation of why we should open up. You've ridden over the hard part. The second one, I'm not a big fan of, because first of all, I didn't ask for the continuous death count, and I think that continuous counts are a bad metric, because we don't keep track of anything in continuous counts except COVID. And so when this line, you're going to constantly have to be adjusting the scale of this graph, which is just going to make the bottom set of data that I wanted, flatter and flatter and flatter over time if you keep that line on there for the cumulative deaths. And we don't keep track of cumulative deaths from heart disease or cumulative deaths from anything else. And so I don't think we should be looking at it that way. And for these graphs, I would request that you keep them clean and keep them on a representation on a scale. See, you could make your graph if you had that thing on a 20 scale, your lines on the bottom would be much more pronounced, and you could see trends, and you'd have two tops in your line instead of having them minimized. So, and to that degree, I like it when it minimizes deaths, but I don't think, if we're trying to display information, I don't think that's useful to have one parameter on there that nobody ever keeps track of in any other context, so that it flattens the other data that we're trying to get to beyond usable recognition.
Supervisor Adam, through the chair, I can certainly do that, given that we do track the cumulative death on the first slide that I show. So I can definitely take off the rust color graph depicting cumulative deaths.
Yeah, and then change the scale for next week's presentation to a 20,
right.
And then you're really going to see that those peaks and valleys pop. Thank you.
Maybe the best way to do it is to have two different charts, because when you rely on the first chart with the cumulative cases and the cumulative deaths, the same problem that Supervisor Adam described happens in that instance. So thank you for that, Supervisor Adam. Dr. Del Reynoso?
Because all of the information's in the tails. That big open part in the middle just doesn't mean anything.
Blueprint for a safer economy. Last week, we issued an amendment, Health Officer Order 2020-12.10, to highlight that outdoor public playgrounds are permissible with guidance. We further clarified higher education as to have the capacity to be opened indoors at 25 capacity or 100 people, whichever is less. Bars, breweries, brew pubs, and distilleries, if serving meals, to follow the restaurant sector limits, as well as wineries and tasting rooms being allowed indoors if serving meals to restaurant sector limits. And I want to pause and really thank Assistant CEO Nancy Anderson for working with the Public Health Department in reaching out to the sectors and making sure that the sectors understand the parameters of opening indoors. The blueprint for a safer economy, as of October 6th, we will be looking at adjusted case rates, something that you have seen, test positivity, also have seen. What is new that I've alluded to earlier is the health equity metric that will be effective today. I believe that the governor will be releasing the numbers at noon, as well as the targeted investment plan, which all counties will have to apply or fill out by the 13th. So this is a familiar table that you have seen, with the last row being the newest, and that is the lowest healthy places index quartile test positivity rate. So in addition to the parameters for us to move to tier 3, where disease is moderate, we will have to also make sure that our bottom quartile does not exceed 5.25 in the test positivity rate. And I will be going through that in more detail with these next few slides. Health equity metric. The goal is to reduce and possibly eliminate disparities in the levels of COVID-19 transmission among county residents. It is also to improve all county COVID-19 data reporting. The state has noted that about 33% of the demographics are missing as counties report them. So there is an increased effort to improve the reporting on race and ethnicity data as it pertains to COVID-19 cases. And CDPH will be posting county-level data for race, ethnicity for tests, cases, and deaths. And I'd like to share that our team has been working on providing this data. And for the next Tuesday's presentation, I will be going over the demographics for our county with regards to cases, hospitalization, and deaths since March 15th. The goal of the health equity metric is also to improve testing positivity rates for the most disadvantaged communities. It will not be used to move counties back to a more restrictive tier, but it could have an impact on us moving to the less restrictive tier. And the point is to close disparities within all counties. And by that, the counties will be required, as I alluded to in the earlier slide, to submit a plan for how we spend our CDC funding on underserved communities in our county. So counties are assessed weekly basis on Tuesdays. The county must have been in the current tier for a minimum of 3 weeks. A county must meet criteria for the less restrictive tier for prior 2 consecutive weeks. This is with regards to us moving to the orange tier. A county larger than 106,000 in population, that we qualify, must meet the health equity metric for the same time period. And again, the targeted investment plan, my department will need to file by the 13th. While we can move to a less restrictive tier towards the orange as our goal, we can be moved back to a more restrictive tier where we started, the purple tier. So the county's adjusted case rate or test positivity has fallen within a more restrictive tier for 2 consecutive weekly periods. State and local health officials will work together on an ongoing basis to assess, and when moving to a more restrictive tier, counties will have 3 days to implement any sector changes or closures unless extreme circumstances merit immediate action. So just wanted to remind your board that we can move forward and we can move backwards. I anticipate that we, at noon, these are the numbers that will be announced for us. Our adjusted case rate is 5.8, still keeping us in the red tier. Our new cases per day per 100,000 unadjusted is 6.4. Positivity rate will be listed as 3.3, and the new health equity metric at 6.7. And this is for the data ending on September 26th. The case rate, as in graphic form, we call this our rainbow chart. Our case rate at 5.8. The increase in rate signifies that there are more cases being identified for our set population of 456,373. Testing positivity on this graph, 3.3. The decreasing testing positivity for the last 4 weeks means that although there have been more positive cases identified, a much larger number of COVID PCR tests were performed in the current rating period compared to the previous ones. So for this rating period, we see a slight increase in test positivity, even though the number of tests performed is higher than the state median. So what that means is that we are seeing a slight uptick in the spread of COVID-19 in our county. So we performed for this rating period 262 average daily. The state median average test is 216. So our adjusted factor was or is 0.91. So the raw number 6.4. Because of the quantity of tests, we were adjusted downward to 5.8.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam.
Dr. Del Reynoso, can you explain to me the difference in the curves on the graphs between that page? I don't know what page we're on right there that was on the screen last, but that and page 6 of hospitalizations, because they're inverted. I don't understand how that could possibly be.
So earlier in the pandemic, when we had testing positivity, fairly limited capacity, and those were restricted to symptomatics. Earlier in the pandemic, we also saw that when people tested positive, there was also a quick turnaround time in which they were hospitalized. Many of those who were hospitalized were tested in the hospital as well. As the pandemic has progressed, we're seeing there is a lot of difference in the people, the age groups getting tested and getting diagnosed as a positive case, so that is reflected in this. And the adjustment is only that what you see in the percentage is really accounting for the numbers that we've been tracking within this framework.
Okay, so what that graph reflects is our moving testing protocols over time, where we were testing only symptomatic people, and then we started testing everybody that wanted to present, and then we started testing only symptomatic people again, and that coincides with those two rises, two peaks.
Right, and
was the symptomatic people that we were testing. Is that correct?
That is correct, but also the testing positivity percentages are dependent on the denominator, is dependent on the volume of being tested.
Well, right, but it also depends highly on what you're cherry picking your test subjects if you're only testing symptomatic people.
So early in the pandemic, there was nationally a shortage of tests capacity, correct? And so we were following CDC and CDPH guidelines in prioritizing those who needed to be tested.
Right, and then there was a time in the middle where that graph has a sag in it between the first peak and the second peak, where we were testing everybody who presented. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And then we went back to testing people who were positive or exhibited symptoms. And that coincides with the second peak. And we're still doing that to this day. Is that right?
So with the testing capacity, so the foundation of being able to box in this disease is widespread testing in the community so that you can identify cases and isolate or quarantine as needed. So this graph
Excuse me, that's not That's not responsive to my question.
No, but if you let me finish, I would.
Well,
So what I'm saying is that
I'd rather
as we
just get the answer
increase-
to my question instead of your speech.
Mr. Chair,
Let's,
I understand
I
there's.
don't know if we're adding here. Let's,
I understand there's passionate feelings here, and I
Look, I'm trying
appreciate
to
Supervisor Adam
establish a
asking
fact.
questions, but interrupting staff is just not an appropriate way to do this.
Negative,
Supervisor-
negative, Supervisor.
Dr. Del
There's a
Reynoso
long-standing tradition of doing exactly that.
Okay, Supervisor Adams, Supervisor Williams, Dr. Del Reynoso is going to answer the question.
Could you please repeat your question?
Are we testing symptomatic people at this point or not?
We are testing everyone who needs to be tested and wants to be tested, whether they are symptomatic or asymptomatic.
So you're testing, I'm trying to determine, how do we find people for testing?
We find people for testing based on their initiation of wanting to be tested. So in the community, an individual decides that they need to be tested for whether it be work, whether it be school, or whether it be a personal desire to know their status. In the hospital, before a procedure, before surgery, people are tested. And as
Okay.
as a matter of
Go ahead.
fact, in our community testing, the majority of people who come to our community testing sites are asymptomatic.
Right. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Dr. Del Reynoso, please continue.
The health equity metric tier progression. So counties with different current status tier, we are in the red, the red substantial tier. For us to be able to move to the moderate, our lowest bottom quartile, again, needs to be less than the 5.2%. There is an accelerated progression possible for counties with current tier status. Again, we are in the red. If we meet for 2 weeks test positivity, both countywide and in the bottom quartile of HPI among tracts in our county, which is less than 2%, and we may progress, even though our case rate is higher than 4. So this is a accelerated pathway for us to be able to move forward, even though our case rate is high due to our low testing positivity. And I also will be spending next Tuesday's presentation going over in detail the quartile in Santa Barbara County and what it means to us in terms of census tracts, in terms of strategies and areas. Briefly, Healthy Places Index indicators. They are 8 indicators going through economics, education, transportation, social, neighborhood, housing, clean environment, and healthcare access. And Healthy Places Index is a public accessible database that one can Google and be specific for Santa Barbara County and can take a look at where are the quartiles in our county. The state is working on a health equity playbook for communities. And so the immediate COVID-19 response strategies that we can undertake is around testing, contact tracing, isolation support, and worker protections. And Santa Barbara County, we have been doing all of the strategies listed in the immediate COVID-19 response. Addressing health equity in Santa Barbara County. So given that back in March, we saw early data of cases and progressing to early accounts of hospitalizations affecting primarily in North County among the Latino population. We were worried because we did not know much about the demographics of the cases as well as the hospitalizations. Building on the partnerships that we have established pre-COVID times with UCSB, with MyCOP, with CAUSE, in terms of addressing health disparities in our county, we came forth and we asked, our public health need was, how do we effectively prevent the increase in cases? How do we prevent the hospitalizations? And how do we prevent the deaths in the Latinx community members? And that was the genesis for forming the Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID-19 Response Task Force. And I have asked Dr. Melissa Smith to be with us to present in detail the work of the task force.
Dr. Smith, welcome, and thank you for your work on this very important element of our COVID response. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me to Thank you. Thanks again, Chair Hart and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you. I am Director of Health Equity Initiatives at UC Santa Barbara and the Interim Coordinator of the Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID-19 Response Task Force. I also had the pleasure of serving as Chair of the Expert Healthcare Panel for the RISE Guide to Reopening Santa Barbara County. I'm a family medicine physician and have had a part-time clinical role in the Health Department clinic in Santa Maria, caring for patients, most of whom are farm workers who are Indigenous migrant women from Oaxaca, Mexico. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it clear that the Latinx and Indigenous migrant communities and their families are challenged by unfavorable social determinants of health. Social determinants of health are the conditions in the environment in which people are born, live, work, learn, and play that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. High-density housing, crowded transportation, lack of access to hand washing at work or access to health care, as well as language barriers, are all examples of social determinants of health that disproportionately impact this population. Unfavorable social determinants of health are compounded by inequities due to race and ethnicity, socioeconomic and migration status, gender, and sexual orientation. These inequities contribute to higher rates of underlying conditions, chronic diseases which increase people's risk of COVID-19 and related complications, as well as higher rates of mental wellness concerns. Because many of these community members are essential workers, they are on the front line and cannot shelter in place. Farm workers, hospital cleaning staff, and service industry workers, therefore, have greater exposure to the coronavirus. It's important to note that on a national level, Black and Pan-Asian Islander communities are also disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. We are working to understand what the data is for these communities in Santa Barbara County and to support efforts to address these inequities. There is tremendous power and synergy in the county-wide collaboration of the task force. We have 93 cross-sectoral partners, including community-based organizations, the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department and Department of Behavioral Wellness, UC Santa Barbara, health service providers, elected officials, funders, and community members. Cross-sectoral collaboration is essential due to the multiple needs of these communities and the diverse resources and capacity as well as expertise of partners who can respond in a coordinated manner. Our task force partners develop and share educational resources, provide direct services, collaborate on outreach efforts, develop innovative programs, and participate in discussions to inform policy change to address community priorities, particularly those focused on the needs of farm workers and their families. Because of the many barriers faced by these communities, it is critical that trusted community partners lead outreach efforts in order to be effective. Our task force efforts are focused on centering community voice and leadership. Community capacity building creates robust, thriving communities and promotes sustainable, participatory processes that are essential to improving community health and well-being. Such an approach creates a foundation for achieving health equity. The bi-monthly task force meetings include vibrant community participation with 60 to 70 participants contributing to our discussion. Simultaneous translation in Spanish ensures that community voices are heard and that we create an inclusive space for dialogue. Our 3 working groups meet on a bi-monthly basis to foster deep and sustained cross-sectoral collaboration and problem-solving in partnership with communities. The Farm Worker Working Group addresses priorities through community outreach, increasing access to resources, and promoting civic engagement and advocacy. The Mental Health and Wellness Working Group provides up-to-date information and resources and facilitates processes that foster support, social connection, empathy, and hope. Their subcommittee efforts are focused on emergency safety planning, youth-teen support and resources, and community outreach, education, and messaging. Finally, the Lompoc Prison Task Force supports the health and well-being of inmates as well as their families. I'd like to highlight some of the accomplishments of our task force. Our partners have provided public health education and multimedia outreach in Spanish and multiple Indigenous languages. Information about COVID-19 prevention, testing, and health services has been provided in flyers and multilingual videos, as well as PSAs. This has been shared via radio, television, text, social messages, social media, websites, and email blasts, as well as through the trusted person-to-person networks of our task force partners. Details about these resources and our partners are noted on this slide. The Mental Health and Wellness Working Group has created a safety plan to support families who may be impacted by COVID-19, as well as a resource magnet and a booklet focused on youth mental health. Our partners have led outreach efforts to communities and farms with resources such as public health information in English, Spanish, and Mixteco, as well as face coverings and hand sanitizers. Our best estimates to date on these numbers include outreach to 21 small farms and distribution of 20,095 face coverings and 1,300 COVID-19 prevention kits. According to Noemi Velasquez, our colleague from the community health centers of the Central Coast, for many of the community members that they encountered, this was the first time they had received any education, outreach, or materials. I'd like to give special thanks to Noemi's team, who included colleagues from the Promotoras Network of Santa Barbara County's Education Office, Dignity Health, and the Food Bank. And I'd also like to thank our other task force partners who are noted on this slide for their outreach work. Our efforts have involved the collaborative development and promotion of public health department policy and COVID-19 program initiatives, including free access to COVID-related care through the public health department, free COVID-19 testing throughout Santa Barbara County, health officer orders, mental health support groups and programs, and the Housing for the Harvest program. We've developed a strong collaboration with a student and faculty team based in the UCSB Center for Publicly Engaged Research. This team has contributed to the efforts of the task force in many important ways. The task force model has been replicated in Ventura County and is now emerging in San Luis Obispo County. Our partners have also led successful efforts to protect the health and well-being of inmates at the Lompoc Prison. Regarding our future plans, our efforts will cement a foundation for future collaboration and rapid response efforts to address new challenges that might impact the Latinx and Indigenous migrant communities. Our cross-sectoral collaboration is an essential and sustainable strategy for achieving health equity in our county. While our immediate efforts have focused on the pressing needs of the Latinx and Indigenous migrant communities as they confront the pandemic, our task force is committed to working with other community organizations to contribute to building a broader county-wide health equity collaborative effort to also include Black, Pan-Asian, LGBTQ, and other communities. We are creating a model for promoting health equity aligned with the health equity metrics provided by the California Department of Public Health that Dr. Do Reynoso just shared with us. And finally, we're planning town hall dialogues with sector leaders, including agriculture, healthcare, the service industry, among others. I'd like to give special thanks to the Board of Supervisors for your important leadership during the pandemic, as well as your support of the task force efforts. And I'd also like to thank all of the participants in the task force, as well as the 93 organizational partners that are listed on the final 2 slides. Thank you so much.
Dr. Smith, I want to thank you on behalf of the board and the whole county for your leadership on this task force and the efforts to promote health equity. As you described, this really is a model. This is exactly what the state's looking for us as counties in partnership with the state to reach out to communities that are disadvantaged and need additional information and assistance. And the collaboration with all these community organizations amplifies that message, and as you said, in many cases gets information for the first time into the hands of people who need that and need to understand what they can do to be safe. So we really appreciate your work. This is an extraordinary effort. Supervisor Hartman?
Yes, I want to echo that sentiment. COVID shows us that we're all in this together. We can't get out of whatever tier we're in until we raise the people in the lowest quartile up. And we had a head start in Santa Barbara County with your efforts. And this is the first time I've heard about it, read a little snippets here and there, but the first time I've gotten to see the range of activities that you're involved in. If there is anything I can do personally or in my role as supervisor to be part of this, I am very laudatory of your efforts, and this is just incredible. It's not easy to reach many of these populations, and you've found and are creating a structure so that we have easy access and communication, in the future, and that is it's really something to congratulate you on, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Williams?
Well, this mission is crucial. While I agree that we have a shared destiny, unfortunately, COVID, like many other health problems, illustrate that we may be in the same storm, but we have different sized boats and are disproportionately affected by that storm. So my question is, I've done a lot of grassroots outreach. It's hard to reach a lot of people. I want to understand, where are those videos and PSAs airing? What methods of communication, printed communication, are we using? And where are areas that you feel that we need to make continued progress in reaching?
Thank you for that question and for your metaphor of the different size boats. I think that for somebody who provides care directly to folks in this community, I think that's very clear to me in many ways. In terms of where the media outreach has been done, or where the videos have been shared, as I mentioned briefly, through various television channels, radio stations, regular blasts, We have partners. There's one group called Mi Vida, Mi Voz, which is a wonderful organization that's based here in Santa Barbara that has been doing incredible media outreach and providing information and resources and videos to this population in South County and has expanded now into North County. And then the videos are also shared on our publicly shared drive that we share with all of the task force participants. So that means if we have 93 organizations, we have well over 200 individual participants. All of those individuals have also been sharing the videos and the flyers that we put out throughout their networks. So you can just imagine the multiplier effect when you have that many individuals who are using their networks. I don't know whether Dr. Do Reynoso wants to add anything about that.
No, it's just that I think what has astounded me is the community members using social media, their personal Facebook, Twitter, to amplify the PSAs that we are releasing. And what I've heard is that the PSAs that we created may have originated from the county comms team, but the community members from early on. I remember in April when we were all worried about the spring break and Easter, and being able to articulate the dangers of gathering and how to be safe. We developed that PSA, and quickly our partners were able to seize that and translate it into a very culturally and linguistically appropriate manner and amplified it throughout their social networks, and it took off.
Yeah, and just to complement what you're saying, for example, if there's a flyer that's been produced about COVID-19 resources, partners who speak different indigenous languages have made a message in different languages referring to the flyer and then shared those through their social media networks. And we are actually starting to track and able to track some of that, some of the impact through the social media. So that's something that we hope to be able to provide in the future, that kind of data. But it's been quite powerful.
Great, and then I just want to take the opportunity, to highlight one of the causational factors, as you have discovered, and that it is a solvable problem. It takes time to solve the problem, but more than time, it takes political will. I mean, in many aspects of health, it's dangerous to be poor. If you look at everything from nutrition to opportunities for exercise to other things, those are hard to change. But in COVID, the biggest factor seems to be housing. That is possible to be changed. And I think all of us have to think about a little bit about our own community's trepidation or antipathy towards housing, and how that is obviously presenting dangers as people live in fairly high density for people, meaning a lot of people in a house, not necessarily a kind of home that you would think is high density. Often these are single family homes just with 15 residents. And while some people do this out of choice, it's obviously in many cases an economic driven question, as people with multiple different families living in the same single family home in communities throughout our county. So I hope it causes us to have a little more political will when it comes to housing.
Well, thank you again for your presentation. It's really inspiring, and it is great infrastructure that you have created with the Department of Public Health to serve us in many ways going forward, but it's particularly crucial right now during the pandemic. And I want to thank Dr. Do Reynoso for her support and leadership and encouragement of this effort. You were right there from the very, very first beginning idea of this, and I think it has served our county very well, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The last portion of my presentation is an update on school waivers. And we have currently 26 schools approved to open K through 6. Since last Tuesday, we have not received additional waivers from CDPH. CDPH is evaluating Carpinteria Unified Elementary School, Ballard Elementary School, and Santa Barbara Middle School. And we are working with Children's Montessori School in Lompoc for their process. And that concludes my presentation this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Duvernoso. Are there questions from board members? Comments? I know we have public comments, so let's go to public comment.
Chair Hart and members of the board, we have 2 requests to speak on this item, and we will go first to Gloria Soto to be followed by Naira Pacheco.
Councilmember Soto, welcome.
Good morning, Chair Hart and members of the board. My name is Gloria Soto, and I am a councilwoman for the city of Santa Maria. I am calling today to share with you a little bit about the Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID-19 Response Task Force. COVID-19 has hit our communities in a really tough way, and more so in the city of Santa Maria, where we're seeing the highest number of COVID cases within our community. And thanks to this task force, one of the things that we've been able to see is the fact of the cross-sectoral partners that have really come together to tackle the barriers that a lot of our families face when seeking care, when seeking access to programs and services to ensure that they and their families are safe and healthy. And so the thing that has proven to be incredibly helpful has been the dialogue between Dr. Van De Reynoso, our Director of Santa Barbara County Public Health, and all of the community benefit organizations that come together to once again share concerns, updates, resources, and talk and think through strategies to help address this evolving pandemic. And so I am just calling to share my appreciation for public health being a part of this task force and really helping us tackle COVID-19 here in our communities, especially in the city of Santa Maria. And it's been fascinating to see, again, all of the community partner organizations come together and strategize as to how we can better support our residents in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Soto, and thank you for your work on the task force and your leadership in Santa Maria.
We will now go to Naira Pacheco, who is our final speaker.
Hello, good morning. My name is Naira Pacheco Guzman. I'm the Language Justice Associate for the Latinx and Indigenous Migrant COVID Response Task Force that was formed early at the onset of the pandemic back in March, and has since grown and developed to host a wide array of partners that include different nonprofits, community-based organizations, public agencies, and certain government offices as well. And so at this point, we have 195 participants on our contact list and 102 partners that are formally part of the task force and receive updates. And we meet every other Friday to have one the Public Health Department Director share report backs and updates to the community that are most relevant specifically to the populations that we are serving. And then we also have a time for community organizations to share updates, as well as our space for our 3 work groups to share about the work and resources that they are providing. And we most recently conducted a survey around the function of our language justice framework and services that we provide for the members of the task force, as well as the sharing of community resources through our online Google Drive. We wanted to conduct this assessment, this survey, to see how useful this was for our partners. And one of the main things that we want to share is that when we asked folks what was the main reason that folks tune into these meetings, at least our expectation was that people tune in to hear the latest information from the Public Health Department. And that came at a close second at 25% of our participants reporting that was their reason. But the majority of respondents for this survey actually shared that they tune in to find ways to connect and collaborate with other partners in facing COVID-19. And this was 42.9% of our task force members who shared this. So all of that to say that it really emphasizes that highlights the importance of having shared spaces in which all of the resources and efforts that are being created by our organizations and agencies on the ground, that there is actually a space for them to work together and collaborate and not recreate the wheel. So I'm grateful for all of the support that the county has provided us and continues to provide, especially in making sure that we can create these organizing and coordinating spaces with language justice integration so that Spanish-speaking community members and organizers can be part of the work. And in the near future, we will be incorporating Indigenous languages so that organizers from our Indigenous communities can also drive the work that is happening and not just be serviced by it. So thank you very much, and we hope to continue providing more relevant updates from our task force in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Pacheco, and thank you for your work on the task force as well. Are there other public commenters?
That was our final speaker.
Okay, thank you. The matter's back to the board. Any comments or questions remaining? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for the presentation. This is really helpful and illuminating, and I know the public will really appreciate hearing this information directly from you, too. Is there a motion to accept this report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
Aye.
Mr. Lavanino?
Aye.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
We'll now take a 10-minute break before we go to Department Item number 3. We'll reconvene the Board of Supervisors meeting for October 6th, and the next item on the agenda is Departmental Item number 3. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Chair Hart, members of the board, departmental item number 3 is from Planning and Development. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding the Santa Barbara County Coalition for Responsible Cannabis appeal of the Planning Commission approval of the Castle Rock Family Farms 2 LLC Cannabis Cultivation Land Use Permit, case number 20 APL 19, and this is in the 3rd District.
Thank you, Ms. Plowman and Ms. Lair and Mr. Peterson. Thank you for all for being here. Ms. Plowman, you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We also have Travis Seward, the Deputy Director, who's present with us, and Mr. Peterson is on Zoom today. This is an appeal of a Planning Commission decision that was heard on July 8th. It is in the 3rd District and is a project that actually, one of the first projects that came forward that actually conforms to the standards that the board had set in the most recent zoning ordinance amendment to the cannabis program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lair and Mr. Peterson.
And Ms. Lair, if you would pause just for one moment, I forgot to ask for ex parte communications. So I see all my colleagues are here. So with that, let's start. Anyone have any ex parte communications they need to announce? Supervisor Hartman.
I had a site visit and met with the agent Troy White, the operator Chris Bellamy, and a counselor John Wilczak.
Supervisor.
And I also talked on the phone, with Mark Shatillo.
Supervisor Williams.
I spoke on the phone yesterday with Mark Chatillo and had a Zoom meeting with the applicants' representatives the week before last.
Ex parte communications in Santa Maria.
Yeah, I actually have some, and I'm waiting for them to. Troy White and Chris somebody. I'm waiting for the Bellamy yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have no ex parte.
And on September 30th, I had a Zoom meeting with Troy White, Patrick Flipson, and Chris Bellamy talking about the setting of the project, its design, and their strategies to reduce impacts. All right, thank you for your patience. Ms. Lair, please begin.
Good morning, Supervisors. Mr. Peterson will be doing the presentation today. Do we have him on Zoom? All right, we're ready to go.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Stephen Peterson, and today it's my pleasure to present to you the appeal of the Castle Rock Family Farms Cannabis Project. Next slide, please. First, starting off with the vicinity map here. As you can see, the project is located 1.9 miles west of the city of Buellton, just south of Highway 246. On this map, the project site is outlined in the pink-purple line. This is a 277-acre legal lot. It's zoned Ag 2100. This legal lot is part of the larger 676-acre Williams Ranch. You can see that the eastern end of the parcel does extend into the Santa Ynez River corridor. And this parcel takes its access off of Highway 246 on an existing gravel driveway. Thank you. This project site is located outside of the Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan area, and the application was processed as an LUP, not a CUP, because the site is not located in an EDRN, it's not adjacent to an EDRN, and it's not accessed through an EDRN. The site has been under active agricultural production since the 1920s with grazing and a variety of row crops, and it is under an active Williamson Act Ag Preserve contract. Next slide, please. Moving on to talk about the project timeline. The project was approved by P&D staff on July 26, 2019, and then appealed on August 5th, 2019 by John Wagner. Before the project made it to its appeal hearing at the Planning Commission, the applicant did submit a revised project description, which was intended to scale back the project. The revised project description eliminated on-site processing from the project, eliminated the nursery component, and reduced the number of structures which would be involved in the cannabis operation from 13 to 5. They also added screening to shield views of the project from Santa Rosa Road to the south. And the appeal went to the Planning Commission on July 8th, where the appeal was denied and the project was approved 5-0. And a timely appeal of that approval was filed on July 20th by the Santa Barbara County Coalition for Responsible Cannabis, which brings us to our hearing today. Next slide, please. The project description. The project calls for 22.95 acres of cannabis cultivation under hoop structures. There is no on-site processing proposed. There are no new structures proposed. There would be 5 full-time staff and an additional 15 temporary staff during 3 annual harvest periods. Those harvest periods would be a month each. So 3 months of the year, you'd have the 15 additional temporary staff. The project's site transportation demand management plan does call for all of the 15 temporary staff to be transported to the site via van pool or carpool. The project also includes 3.28 acres of habitat restoration along the Santa Ynez River to add native upland riparian vegetation in a 150-foot wide swath next to the river. In addition, there is landscape screening, which will hide the project from public views, both from Highway 246, which views the project from the north, and from Santa Rosa Road, which is across the south side of, on the south side of the Santa Ynez River. So the project is fully screened from public views. Finally, the project does not have an odor abatement plan, as one is not required under an LUP in the Ag 2 zone. Next slide, please. Taking a look at our site plan map, the 3 green areas are the 3 cultivation areas. The one on the furthest east there under the pointer is cultivation area A. That's 16.53 acres in size. Just to the west of that, you have cultivation area B, which is 4.63 acres in size. And further to the west in the middle of the parcel, you have cultivation area C, which is 1.79 acres. And again, all those areas would feature cannabis cultivation under hoops. In the purplish area on the map, you can see the operations area. That's 0.53 acres in size, a half acre in size, and that would contain 2 structures associated with the cannabis operation, a 320 square foot storage building and a 160 square foot office, which would be remodeled to add restroom facilities for the employees. There's also a compost area in that operations area. At present, the site features 27 existing structures, and with this permit, 6 of those structures would be demolished. That would leave us with 21 structures on site. And only 5 of those 21 structures would be part of the cannabis operation. As I just mentioned, 2 of those structures, existing structures, are located in the in the operations area in purple. And there are also 3 water tanks, which are all existing as well. A 5,000 gallon tank located on the north end of cultivation area A. It's shown as number 37 on the map. And then there are 2 20,000 gallon water tanks that are near the admin hold area in the center of the site, and those are labeled number 38 and 39. So out of the 21 remaining existing structures, 9 of those were not previously properly permitted, and those 9 structures will be legalized through approval of this permit and subsequent building permits. The project features fencing, security fencing, individually around each of the 3 cultivation areas, and that's a 6-foot tall no climb deer fence. The operations area is also fenced individually, and the administrative hold area is also fenced individually. Finally, the project features security lighting, which would be fully shielded, motion sensor activated, and set to shut off after 6 minutes or less. Continuing on to the next slide, staff did review the issues raised in the appeal and summarized them into 8 points, and I'd like to run through each of those 8 appeal issues now. First, appeal issue number 1, the appellant contends that the county's CEQA review was inadequate. Staff responds that the program EIR was certified as adequate on February 6, 2019 by the board, at which time a statement of overriding considerations was adopted, stating that the benefits of the cannabis program outweigh the significant and unavoidable environmental impacts, and no legal challenge to the adequacy of the PEIR was raised before the statute of limitations expired. Next slide, please. Appeal issue number 2, also related to CEQA. The appellant contends that changes to the uniform rules since certification of the PEIR represent substantial changes to the circumstances under which the project will be undertaken. Appellant also contends that changes to the right to farm ordinance that have been adopted since the PEIR was prepared represent new information of substantial importance regarding new or newly feasible mitigation measures, and that therefore further environmental review is necessary. Staff would respond that section 3.9 of the PEIR, which is the land use section, anticipated that amendments to the uniform rules based on adoption of the cannabis program would take place. Therefore, the board adopted amendments to the uniform rules do not constitute a substantial unanticipated change to the circumstances under which the project will be undertaken. Further, the same methods and techniques for odor abatement that exist now, including carbon filtration and vapor phase systems, were available, feasible, and widely known at the time the PEIR was prepared. Therefore, changes to the right to farm ordinance did not introduce new or previously infeasible mitigation techniques that were not available and considered under the PEIR. Moving on to appeal issue number 3, also related to CEQA. The appellant contends that the PEIR did not consider pesticide drift issues and their impact on non-cannabis agriculture. Staff would respond that pesticide drift is not allowed under the state and federal laws that regulate it, and those regulations existed at the time the PEIR was prepared and are unchanged since. CEQA is designed to look at the environmental impacts of a project, not on potential impacts from neighboring land uses on a project. Moving on to appeal issue number 4, also related to CEQA. The appellant asserts that the CEQA analysis was deficient because the PEIR did not consider cannabis odor impacts to tasting rooms. Staff responds that the presence of wine tasting rooms in the county was plainly known at the time the PEIR was certified. Significant and unavoidable impacts from cannabis odors were identified as impact AQ5 of the PEIR, and that there have not been any substantial changes to the project or the circumstances under which it will be undertaken since certification of the PEIR that would necessitate further environmental review. Moving on to appeal issue number 5. The appellant, also related to CEQA, the appellant asserts that the PEIR did not anticipate the cluster of cannabis projects that are located west of Buellton, and that therefore cumulative impacts were not properly analyzed. Staff responds that the PEIR did assume that there would be concentrations of cannabis projects in certain areas of the county, and specifically the Santa Ynez Valley was identified as one of these concentration areas. Cumulative impacts were analyzed in the PEIR, and the Class 1 impacts associated with them were mitigated or overridden. Appeal issue number 6, also related to CEQA. The appellant asserts that the county's CEQA checklist does not evaluate unique site conditions or special aspects of the project's operations and does not provide evidence to support its conclusions. Staff responds that Section C1 of the CEQA checklist, which was attachment 3 to today's board agenda letter, does evaluate unique or special aspects of the project, and that evidence supporting the conclusions reached in the checklist are included throughout the record, including the application itself, supporting materials, and the CEQA checklist document itself. Appeal issue number 7. The appellant contends that the project is inconsistent with Goal 1 of the Ag element, which you can see written out on the slide. Staff responds that the project will continue agricultural use of the property, will not convert agricultural land to other uses, does not propose new structures, and will not result in a reduction of cultivated acreage. This project constitutes a crop change only. Moving on to our last appeal issue, number 8. The appellant contends that cannabis cultivation is occurring on the property and has expanded beyond the limits of the legal non-conforming cannabis area. So therefore, the appellant contends that finding 2.1.2.3 cannot be made. That finding states that the subject property is in compliance with all laws, regulations, and rules pertaining to uses. Staff responds that all cannabis was eradicated from this site in 2018. P&D has visited the site on multiple occasions since then, most recently on September 11th, 2020 for a thorough inspection, and no cannabis was observed on site. Further, this application does not qualify as legal non-conforming, nor is the applicant claiming they are legal non-conforming. That concludes the appeal issues and brings us to today's recommended action. Staff recommends that the board deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval, determine that the previously certified PEIR constitutes adequate environmental review and that no additional environmental review is necessary, and grant de novo approval of the project subject to the conditions of approval. If the board would like to go in a different direction, we would ask that you refer the item back to staff for assistance with appropriate findings and conditions. That brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for the excellent presentation. Are there questions from staff or for staff? All right, next we will go to the presentation from the appellant, and that would be Courtney Taylor representing the Santa Barbara County Coalition for Responsible Cannabis. Supervisor Williams, did you have a question?
I can wait until the appellant and the applicant speak.
Okay. Ms. Taylor?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hart, members of the board. My name is Courtney Taylor, appearing today on behalf of appellant, the Santa Barbara Coalition for Responsible Cannabis. Please proceed to slide 2. As you can see, this project is one of the many in a cluster west of the city of Buellton and part of a smaller cluster of projects that are all on directly adjacent parcel, with only one containing a condition that the project will abate odors due to its location within the Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan. Appellant was pleased to see the changes made by the applicant, but there is a remaining issue regarding the odor impacts of this project and the cumulative impacts given the adjacent projects proposed. We are not concerned that the project won't be compliant with its permit condition or that the applicants are bad actors, as stated in some of the public comments supporting the project. We are concerned there is no permit condition that assures neighbors that there will be no adverse impacts due to odors. This project does have approval for 4 one-month-long harvest periods per year. Due to harvest cycles, appellant fears plants on this parcel will be constantly going through growing and flowering cycles, resulting in year-round odors. As I'll discuss, odor mitigation on Ag 2 parcels is now feasible after amendments to the county's Right to Farm Ordinance. Skip the next slide and go into slide 4, please. For time, I'm going to skip a couple of slides. As a quick CEQA refresher for the Cannabis Ordinance, a PEIR was prepared and certified. Subsequent use of this PEIR to support project approvals is allowed only for project impacts that were analyzed in the PEIR. Additional project level environmental review is required if, among other things, there are substantial changes which increase the severity of the impacts or mitigation measures previously found not to be feasible are now feasible. Both of these are the case here due to changes in law that occurred after the PEIR was certified, scenarios which were not considered in the PEIR. Next slide, please. We haven't talked about this directly previously, but understanding that tasting rooms are supported agricultural uses for direct sales of ag products and the critical role they play as a revenue source for wineries are both extremely important concepts. On-site tasting rooms in ag zones are more akin to farm stands, but are unique because the ability to smell the product is paramount, and the products are frequently consumed on-site, many times outdoors. Approximately 81% of wine sales are generated from the tasting room. It's the consumer's connection to the winery. Without it, wine sold would just be another wine on a shelf competing with other brands. The tasting room really serves a critical function for winery sustainability and success. And in Santa Barbara County, the wineries with the top sales are in Ag 2 zones where odor abatement is not currently required. Next slide. Some of this may seem obvious, but wine is primarily valued on its organoleptic qualities, smell and taste. Where it's grown, consumers need to smell and taste the wines, and the wine qualities are unique to its vineyard site. We cannot simply relocate and rebuild estate tasting rooms. Other wine growing regions have recognized that odor impacts negatively impact tasting room experiences and have environmental review and mitigation to address this. The PEIR itself only mentions wine tasting one time to compare it with an alternative where cannabis would have had similar on-site retail sales. The impacts are otherwise ignored entirely. Without odor abatement, the odor impacts from this project and the other surrounding projects will negatively impact tasting rooms in the vicinity. Given the dependence that wineries have on tasting room revenues, a material decline in tasting room visits will threaten the viability of the wine industry, who again, unlike cannabis, cannot relocate. I'd now like to turn to 3 changes in law that occurred after the PEIR was certified that trigger project level review of Castle Rock under CEQA and give your board authority to condition this project to mitigate odors. Next slide. The PEIR did not require odor abatement in Ag 2 areas in light of the right to farm protections for traditional agriculture. Post PEIR certification, the board amended the Right to Farm Ordinance and excluded cannabis from its protections. The PEIR assumed right to farm protections would apply and did not discuss alternatives. With this amendment, odor mitigation is now feasible because the protections preventing odor abatement in Act 2 were removed by the board. This is a substantial change in circumstances and local law triggering project level review and mitigation of the project's odor impacts under CEQA. Next slide. Second, the PEIR and its alternatives assumed APAC would review projects for compatibility with adjacent land uses. This review is referenced repeatedly in the PEIR as the mechanism to ensure ag resources are not negatively impacted by cannabis. A post-PEIR amendment to the uniform rules removed this review. No analysis in the PEIR covered this scenario. Without this review, the impacts of this project to adjacent ag uses, including tasting rooms as a supportive ag use, were not reviewed by APAC, which was a fundamental assumption of the PEIR's analysis of impacts to ag. Another substantial change in circumstances. Next slide. Lastly, after the PEIR was certified, the state legislature amended the Williamson Act requiring cannabis be treated as a compatible use only. There's been some confusion why this language is permissive, and that has served as the county's legal basis for adopting rules that treat cannabis as compatible. Let me explain. Some counties would prefer that cannabis be banned on contracted lands, so the statute had to be permissive to allow other counties to make that determination. However, the statute does not permit counties to treat cannabis as an ag commodity, not subject to compatibility review by their local APAC. Thus, any determination of eligibility of the parcel by APAC under the Williamson Act cannot be relied upon for project approval and the finding that the project is consistent with all laws. The process being used is not in conformance with current state law. Compatibility review is required by law, was expressly contemplated in the PEIR and the alternatives, and such review would address the odor impacts to ag and its supportive uses. Skip the next 2 slides, please, and go to slide 12. The cumulative impacts of this project when combined, one more please, with surrounding projects cannot be ignored. 143 acres of cultivation proposed in this smaller area and 570 in this area west of Buellton. Next slide. Like many cannabis projects next to ag uses, this project is contrary to the county's goal to assure continuation of ag as a major viable industry. This applies not only to the project, but surrounding parcels. The intent has never been to favor one ag crop over another or force out another industry for the benefit of another. The intent is to integrate and coexist. The county has recognized through its allowance of on-site tasting rooms and ag zones the importance of direct sales for wine grape growers and understands how this fosters the success of the wine industry. There's substantial evidence that the ability of these industries to coexist is challenging at best. With this project specifically, the odor impacts to supportive ag uses like tasting rooms are concerning and detrimental to the industry's continued viability. On this basis, the board cannot find the project is consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. Next slide. In light of all this, your board's clear basis for denial is simply the project-specific environmental review is clearly required based on the 3 post-PER changes in law that I just reviewed, and given the substantially more severe impacts to adjacent agriculture. These changes in law gutted APAC's review of projects for compatibility with adjacent ag and increased impacts, but have also allowed for odor mitigation to be feasible to reduce these impacts. Next slide. We believe lack of odor control in this important region remains problematic, and your board has a legal basis for requiring mitigation to address this. It is within your discretion to condition the project to mitigate impacts. Cannabis LUPs are not ministerial, they're discretionary. The ordinance specifically states it sets out only minimum land use requirements, and the 6 required plans for cannabis sites impose clear discretion on the part of the county to mitigate environmental impacts and condition the entitlements on the adequacy of these plans, a hallmark of discretionary permits. With this authority in mind, our proposed condition is simple: no detectable odors in tasting areas rather. This condition is legally defensible, necessary to protect agriculture and its supportive uses, and is based on substantial evidence and experience that cannabis odors negatively impact adjacent businesses. If the applicant truly believes the setbacks in landscaping that are part of their project result in no odor off-site, this condition should be acceptable and would address the majority of the public concerns you have heard about. Thank you again for all of your time and hard work on this difficult issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for your presentation. Are there questions for Ms. Taylor? All right, then we'll next go to the applicant, Troy White, representing Castle Rock Family Farms.
Good morning, Chair Hart and honorable board members. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Troy White with TW Land Planning and Development. I'm the agent for the applicant, Castle Rock Family Farms 2 LLC. I want to thank staff for their great presentation and their hard work over the past 2 years on this project. Staff's responses to the appellant's issues were expertly addressed within the board letter and their presentation. Following our presentation, the product team is available to address any specific follow-up questions that this board might have. I'd like now to provide a broad overview of the project and touch on just a few points that we feel are worthy of the board's consideration. My presentation will be followed by a few closing words from Castle Rock Family Farms principal, Sean Hecht. Our attorney, Larry Conlon with Capello and Noel, is also available to address any legal questions. Next slide. The project is located on the Williams Ranch, a beautiful piece of land that is over 676 acres in size and is comprised of 4 parcels. The Williams family, the property owners, have deep roots in the community and have been ranching in the valley for over 4 generations now. Several members of the Williams family reside on site, and manage livestock on the property. Ranching will continue with the proposed cultivation activity. A small 25-acre portion of the Williams property has always been leased for farming. The supplemental income stream associated with this farming has been and continues to be an important source of revenue for the Williams family. The lease monies help to support the management and maintenance of the larger ranch and related cattle operations. The small lease area, comprising less than 5% of the overall ranch, is located far from the highway and has graciously been entrusted to the Castle Rock Family Farms Group to carry on the farming legacy on the Williams Ranch. Next slide. The Williams Ranch has been cultivated for nearly 100 years and perhaps even longer. This aerial photo was taken in 1928. Highway 246 is located at the top of the slide, and the San Ynez River is located at the right. The proposed project is located on some of the same cultivated fields located between the main driveway and the river that were planted here in 1928. At its essence, the project represents a simple change of crop and will replace lower margin crops with cannabis. The revenue from cannabis will provide greater support for ranch operations on site and will have the added benefit of creating new and now increasingly potential tax revenues for the state and county. Next slide. The Castle Rock cultivation project was purposefully chosen because of its location in a relatively isolated area set back substantially from Highway 246, Santa Rosa Road, and other neighbors. The project site is surrounded by other ranching and farming operations, mountainous terrain, and the Santa Ynez River with no immediately adjacent vineyards. It should be noted that the project is located over 2 miles from the city of Buellton. Next slide. As we learned in the Busy Bee PC hearings last year with expert testimony provided by CESP Consulting and SCS engineers, information which is hereby incorporated by reference, cannabis odors are virtually undetectable 200 feet from the source. This slide shows the 2 closest tasting rooms to the north and south within the vicinity of the project. The project's closest wine tasting room, Hence, is over 2,000 feet away. It is also worth noting that all on-site processing buildings have been eliminated from the project. Mature cannabis will be removed from the site the same day it is harvested. There will be no on-site drying or curing of cannabis. Given the distances and prevailing wind direction from the west and lack of on-site processing, the Castle Rock project will not result in nuisance odor impacts at local tasting rooms. Next slide, please. As shown in this slide, the cultivation area is located approximately 1,700 feet away from Santa Rosa Road and 1,800 feet away from Highway 246. The northern and eastern project perimeters will be landscaped to limit the already distant views onto the property. The proposed trees and shrubs are native and drought tolerant. The project will be adequately landscaped and within 5 years will reasonably screen the view of the proposed hoops and related infrastructure. Next slide, please. This is a line of sight section showing the 1,800-foot distance between Highway 246 and the proposed cultivation area. This slide demonstrates that the existing and proposed landscaping will effectively screen the project. Next slide, please. Here's an existing photo from Highway 246 of that view shed. Our project is on the distant horizon. Next slide. Here is an after photo simulation with landscaping of that same line of sight view. Next slide. Similarly, this is a line of sight section showing the 1,700-foot distance from Santa Rosa Road and the proposed cultivation area. Next slide, please. Here's that same view looking west from Santa Rosa Road across the Santa Ynez River and other private ag property towards the Castle Rock site in the distance. Next slide, please. And here is that same view with the proposed landscaping at year 5. As you can see, the Santa Ynez River and its riparian vegetation dominate distant views from Santa Rosa Road looking northwest towards the property. The existing and proposed landscaping clearly will effectively screen the project. Next slide, please. With respect to the appellant's allegations of illegal activity, I'd like to set the record straight. There is no cannabis being grown on the property currently. Medicinal cannabis was grown on the site legally prior to 2016. The Sheriff's Department has verified with the property owner that illegal non-conforming grow did historically grow on the property. In March 2019, a letter was received from the county for a potential zoning violation due to an alleged complaint that cannabis was being grown within hoops on the property. On April 29, 2019, TW Land P&D spoke with County Code Enforcement Officer Annalise Merlot, and it was verified that no cannabis was being grown on the property. The case has been closed. Castle Rock was also asked by permit compliant staff to not grow in any expanded areas until the county LUP and business license have been issued. Castle Rock has willingly complied and in fact suspended all cannabis activities pending issuance of the LUP and business license. Simply put, there are no active or pending criminal matters associated with this project. And now I'd like to turn over the presentation to Castle Rock partner Sean Hex for some closing words. Next slide, please.
Hello, board. My name is Sean Hecht, and I'm a resident of Santa Barbara and a local businessman. My partners and I chose the Williams Ranch property for our cannabis farm based on the site's exceptional location and compatibility with the county's requirements. We have met several times with the prior appellant, John Wagner, as well as Blair Pence. Prior to Planning Commission, we made several concessions in an effort to address their concerns and those of the coalition. The original project had 2 processing buildings and a nursery area. Although we did not feel these operations would affect anyone, all of these uses have been eliminated. We are also now providing additional landscape screening and have agreed to reduce staffing. We have engaged with the appellant legal team on several occasions in an attempt to resolve the remaining concerns, including as recently as last night. Those goodwill overtures were flatly rejected. We are reasonable people and have compromised considerably along the way. I'd ask you to reconsider the hardships the Williams family, my business partners, have endured over the last 2 years to get to this point. We have watched closely Planning Commission and the board deliberate on policy and other cannabis projects. This project is 100% compliant with county policies. Candidly, we feel like our project is the best cited and most thoughtfully designed of anything you've been presented with to date. On behalf of the Williams family, the Castle Rock family, and my own family, please deny the appeal and approve the Castle Rock Family Farms project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there questions of the applicants? Supervisor Hartman.
Yes, it was my understanding that in terms of growth cycles in the Santa Ynez Valley, as a general rule, it's 2 harvests a year. Exceptional conditions would be 3 harvests a year, and that you can't stagger, that it has to be within the 2-week period. It can't be a constant. This is very, very significant because, as everybody knows, there's no odor control requirements on Ag 2 lands if they aren't adjacent to an EDRN or an urban boundary. Here, I'm shocked to hear that there's 4 cycles a year, and I'd like somebody to talk about that, 4 different harvests a year.
This is Troy White. I can respond. We anticipate no more than 3 harvest cycles.
And that is what you told me.
Exactly. And so, I'm not sure how 4, we arrived at 4, but we anticipate no more than 4. So we're looking in between 2 to 3 grows per year.
Well, before I vote on this, I'd like more clarification to how this is buttoned down.
Can I add to that? Just that can't be used as a way for applicants not to try to keep one age of the crop. I mean, I feel very strongly that that odor is lessened in impact when you have one age of the crop and not several different ages of the crop, because then you have, if you have one age of the crop and you have 3 crops a year, then you just have six weeks of odor in a year. But if you have multiple ages of the crop, as happened with an illegal grow in the area, then you have a far more larger impact.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Hartman and Supervisor Williams, I'm going to address the part of it that nails down how many harvests they can have per year. So what they put in their project description is what the total number of harvests that they can have per year, because that's the first condition of approval that's assigned to the project, right? So if they had more harvests, they would not be in conformance with their permit. I don't have enough specific knowledge about exactly how the growers are operating, but I will either have Catherine or Stephen Peterson address that question. But these are in hoops, right? So they're weather dependent, light dependent, that type of thing. So my assumption is that they will be having one crop and then they will harvest it, another crop, and then they will harvest it, similar to the way Busy Bee does their work. But I would like Ms. Lair and Mr. Peterson to speak a little bit more to that, and the applicant if they have something to add.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I can address that question. The project description as written and included in your board letter and materials for today has three harvests of 1 month in duration. I don't know where the idea of 4 harvests came from.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Peterson.
consistent with our project description and our intent. Thank you.
And then that
Mr.
still
Chair?
leaves are they staggered or is it one harvest?
Supervisor Hartman, this is Troy White. We are anticipating that they will not be staggered. In fact, they will be sequential. So ultimately, we'll have 1 harvest or 3 harvests, but they won't be staggered month after month after month. That they would occur within a 2 to 4 week window for each harvest for the entire property.
Thank you. And is that enforceable?
It's consistent with our site transportation demand management plan, and so I would argue that it is.
Board of Supervisors, I just wanted to step in real quick. I think I just want to get clarification. When I'm reading the project description, it says during 4 annual 1 month long harvesting planting periods. So I'd just like to take a second to confer with staff to make sure we're giving you the right information.
Okay. We have Supervisor Adam, I think, had a question.
Well, I was maybe, as the only farmer that's around, going to shed a little light on how this actually works in the real world. You know, a lot of times you don't have enough plants. You know, it may be the going in plan to plant the whole thing all at once, three times a year, and 3 times was represented to me yesterday. So Mr. White gave me 3 times yesterday. So when I did my site visit, so I don't know that there was a 4 anyway. I never saw a 4 in print anywhere, but you know, sometimes the plants don't come, sometimes they die, and then you got to replant. You know, things happen, and when the rubber meets the road, and you know they're likely to get mixed planting dates, and then you're going to have extended harvests, and that would be typical of any kind of agriculture because it just doesn't come out of a mold, and you know they're living things, and you can't make them all come at the same time under all circumstances. So you know their plan may be to have 3 crops a year and to have 2-week harvests, but you know I don't know how they can do that much better than I can, because we can't do it that accurately.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam.
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
members of the board, what I'd like to say is that the actual condition of approval now reads 4 harvests. And so if the applicant does indeed intend for it to be 3, as they have stated, then we would change that in their project description and in that condition of approval.
And Mr. White, is that your intent, to limit it to 3?
Yeah, that was our submitted, it's consistent with our plans, consistent with our submitted project description. So I believe it's more than likely just a Scrivener's error. And so, of course, we're okay with that revision.
Okay, we'll make that change as you requested. Thank you. Supervisor Hartman.
And could you just, I believe with Busy Bee and the others, we did stipulate a 2-week period of harvest. I think this is very, very significant, whether we have odor always or whether we have it during a harvest period that we can predict.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Hartman, I know that we discussed that they would be 2-week harvests, and we'd have to go back and look to see exactly the way their project description was written to verify that it is actually indeed specifically 2 weeks. But I think that would be hard to regulate, that it's exactly 2 weeks. So if you can give us a minute, we can take a break and we can look to see what we did require with Busy Bee, so we can ensure that we're being consistent in how we are applying that particular standard. So if there's any other questions, we'll take those now, and then maybe we'll take a break and take a look at what was done for Busy Bee.
Okay, let's continue on with the hearing by are there other questions from the board of the applicants, appellants, or staff? If not, well, we'll pause, give everybody a chance to get their questions out, but then we'll go to the rebuttals, then we'll go to public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Chair Hart and members of the board, we have one request to speak on this item.
All right, let's have that person have an opportunity to speak to us.
Chair Hart, members of the board, we are going to Liz Rogan.
Greetings, board. This is Liz Rogan. I'm calling in today. Thank you so much for your time and energy and these constant appeals that you are dealing with. I'm a member of California Women for Agriculture, and in watching all of these things, I have to agree with Supervisor Adams. A lot of these things, you're talking about agriculture. You're talking about plants. These do not conform to linear schedules in terms of exactly 2 weeks. There can be crop failures, there can be pests. There are so many conditions that change this. So really trying to buttonhole these farmers in these strict, squares is not in any way feasible or fair. Cannabis is essential agriculture. Everyone's constantly talking about the terpenes, also called volatile oil compounds, to make it sound scarier. Well, in grapes, there is over 75 terpenic compounds. So there's over 4,000 terpenes in the natural world. The thing is, why are some terpenes okay and others not? Cannabis and wine are compatible. There are multiple winemakers who also have cannabis next to them. Another thing to note is climate change is continually happening. This does affect grapes. It changes the odors. So these things are not always going to be the same. I understand you need to make a decision now, and I think this Castle Rock Family Farm has gone above and beyond in contacting and communicating with the appellant, and essentially it's just, I'm asking for you to continue letting cannabis farmers move forward. The amount of taxes that are coming in are significantly more than grape taxes. It's a much more sustainable crop. It uses significantly less water and barely any pesticides. There is no concern of pesticide drift, and essentially cannabis has been shown to be basically have many more health benefits than alcohol, even though many people don't like to hear that. So I'm asking you today to go with logic over emotion again. Let all businesses and small farms continue to grow, to build our economy, to bring us the necessary benefits to our community in terms of economic and jobs and taxes, healthcare, constantly improving our environment. And I want to thank you for your hard work, because I know you have been here for multiple years doing this, and it's not easy. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rogan. We'll now go to the rebuttal time, where the appellant has 5 minutes and the applicant also has 5 minutes. So let's begin with the appellant. Ms. Taylor, you have 5 minutes.
Hi. So just want to quickly address the references to the 4 1-month-long harvests. That has been in the project description the entire time. I have never seen it state 3 harvests. So I disagree that that was a Scrivener's error, and just want to note that without the appeal, the applicant would have been entitled to 4 harvests. So that has been in the project description and conditions of approval from the outset, including before the Planning Commission appeal. In terms of the board's authority to impose an odor condition, the county cannot argue the permit is ministerial and cannot be conditioned by your board to address these impacts, while also stating its approval relies on the PEIR and the CEQA checklist. Both cannot be true, as ministerial permits do not require CEQA compliance. These are discretionary permits. You are within your legal authority to condition the project to address impacts, specifically odor impacts. So with the discretionary nature of cannabis land use permits and the post-PEIR changes in law that I discussed, your board does have the legal authority to impose odor abatement conditions like the one we proposed to mitigate this specific impact. You've seen substantial evidence that the ability of the wine industry and the cannabis industry to coexist is extremely challenging. This project is in an area that is highly, highly concentrated with outdoor cannabis grows that do not have odor abatement plans required, and there are tasting rooms nearby. And as I outlined, tasting rooms really are supportive agricultural uses that the county supports. There's a reason the county supports putting tasting rooms on agricultural zone parcels and doesn't only require them in urban and commercial areas. And having a substantial number of these projects, including this one, without any enforceable measures to control odor on the applicant is very concerning, and it will be detrimental to the industry's continued viability in this specific area. And I'll state it again, you heard from the applicant's agent, they truly believe there are these significant setbacks and landscape buffers that will result in no odor impacts. I love if that's true, I really do. And then that condition that those impacts not happen should be acceptable to the applicant. I'm really unclear why that would not be acceptable unless there are in fact odor concerns on the applicant's end. So would really like to see, as I said, a condition from your board. The one that we proposed, we would be happy with, that addresses this specific issue. And again, you're well within your legal authority to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. We'll now go to the project applicant. Mr. White, you have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. We believe the project's 100% consistent with the Land Use Development Code. We work closely with staff to ensure its consistency. The project is consistent with the SEQA review that county staff has prepared. The issues that Ms. Taylor has brought up in terms of odors, we've attempted to work with her and we were rebuffed. And so ultimately, We're prepared to move forward. We're happy to address any and all questions you might have, but we ask for your support. We do think that this site is well located, substantially away from tasting rooms, substantially away from highway. It's set back significantly compared to any other projects that have been reviewed and approved by this board to date. We do continue to feel like this is the best cited and most well-designed project, and so we'd respectfully ask for you to deny the appeal and to approve the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. White. And just to, again, put a point on it, your intention is to have your project description limited to 3 harvests per year, correct?
That's accurate, and that's consistent with what we've submitted. So I think purely it was a mere Scribner's error. So entirely okay with what we originally submitted, which was 3.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. That concludes the rebuttal time. We are now to staff comments. Does staff need more time to make any additions or changes? Ms. Plowman.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. So in our review of the Busy Bee project, the project description their project description said 3 harvests per year with approximately 2 weeks of harvest time depending on weather conditions. So it allowed some flexibility for changes to happen in the environment. This project description had listed 4 harvests per year, but they've now agreed to 3. And they have up to a 1-month period for harvest is what they listed in their project description. So what we will be doing is ensuring that we have language that the applicant can live with, and we will bring it to the board and post it in track changes so you can see what the amendments would be, if that is what the applicant is agreeing to and what the board is comfortable with.
Okay. Mr. Gazzani?
Chair and Supervisors, and I'd spoken with Director Plowman a moment ago, and we agree that a great way to do that also would be to have the slide shown and provided to the board and the public, and also within the recommended actions, that recommended action B, which is currently make the required findings for approval, would begin with accept applicant's revised project description to be 3 annual harvests, not 4 annual harvests, comma, and then make the required findings for approval, so that the action of the board will be clear on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Gazzani. Supervisor Hartman.
So you're going to have a little more back and forth with the applicant, and for my vote, I would strongly encourage Busy Bee wording.
Okay. Are there other comments from the board? Sounds like we're going to trail this item for staff to be able to work out these items. Or
Mr. Chair, if you want, we could take a 5-10 minute break before the lunch hour and probably could be done.
Okay.
If
we could do that too.
That is acceptable to the board.
Let us take a 10-minute break.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam.
Well, so I was going to make these comments a little later, but I think it might be better now.
Okay.
And then if there's any traction on some of these suggestions, then maybe they can get incorporated during that period as well. So, I've had a problem with this PEIR since it became apparent that we did not have the capability of synthesizing the information or processing the information that was available to us at the time. And we keep being told that this information was available to us at the time. But that doesn't mean that we were able to predict the consequences accurately. And so, as I've stated many times, drift is not the only source of problems between cannabis and non-cannabis neighbors. And we have the whole waft issue, which we've discussed ad some nauseum. Same goes for the smell issue. As I traveled yesterday to the site via 246, I was absolutely assaulted by the skunk smell of what I was told by our applicants was Busy Bee's cannabis. And so that is a really important and intense smell. That's not something that normal people would be able to ignore. So the applicant's agents told me that the smell was only going to be present during harvest, which was 2 weeks. And they also told me that there are 3 harvests per year, so that's not 2 weeks, but 6. And that all said, if there was a place that I think it could work, this would be it. And this location should tend to blow away from the smell should tend to blow away from the closest wineries. However, I predict from time to unpredictable time, the odor will travel in a bad direction and impact other commercial and residential uses. So what I kind of want to suggest here is, and maybe the applicant would be willing to volunteer a condition that their odor does not result in a nuisance to residential or commercial uses within a 2-mile radius, because I could support this project if I had that kind of assurance, but short of that, I think I have to vote no.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Are there other comments from board members?
My light was on.
Okay, Supervisor Hartman.
I agree wholeheartedly with Supervisor Adam. The first point I agree with is that we can't really override considerations we didn't understand or that weren't known at the time. And at least you have 2 of us formally on the record on that point. About the odor, again, I agree that there are many fine things about this project. They're kind of stuck in a way of this cumulative impact. We've spent the last days in the Santa Ynez Valley with heat over 100 degrees, with heavy smoke, particulates. And then it's made even worse by this cloying smell of cannabis. I've had letters and emails and complaints from residents. We all have a letter from the city of Buellton. I want to remind everybody on this board, there's no odor control for large agricultural parcels. It's having a huge negative impact on the residents' well-being, visitors and businesses in the Santa Ynez Valley. It's not imagined, it's not exaggerated, it's real, and it's going to get much worse. I have here the list in the Santa Rita Hills of the projects that are coming forward. It's almost 800 acres of cannabis. This isn't even adjacent to Santa Rita Hills. Our whole cap is 1575. This is half of the cap concentrated on 246 Santa Rosa Road, Santa Rita Hills, adjacent. The wind blows towards the city. The wind blows towards many people. And I don't think we should focus on this project, but we really need to address this. I know there's another supervisor on this board who's now getting some heat because of hemp. And it's real. People are experiencing some really significant impacts, and we need to look at that. We can't simply ignore it.
Supervisor Williams.
I understand and empathize with the concerns of Supervisor Hartman, and I do think that we need to encourage applicants and appellants to attempt in all cases to work things out and to revise project descriptions to be more modest. For my part, I look askance at projects that are a high amount of acreage, particularly on a limited parcel, and am supportive of projects that have a more modest coverage of their site and are more removed from areas of possible impact. I would love nothing more than a chance to deny a project. I mean, to show the board's determination to get this right, but this is not that project. This project site has less potential for conflicts than other places. They have already done what we wanted, which is to revise the project to be more modest and more respectful. I'm disappointed that both sides weren't able to come together, but I appreciate that each in their own fashion attempted to reach that compromise, and for my part, I think that should be a real something that we continue to look at going further, and to encourage. I mean, for my part, I don't support more than half of the cap going in to one little part of the county, and will very much support revising project descriptions to make that cumulative impact less severe. Oh, and to the issue of the harvests, I think this should be standard operating procedure. I don't know if 2 weeks is the magic number. I don't know if it's 3 weeks. A month seems a little bit long, but we need to limit the harvest window to limit the potential for odor nuisance. I'm not even saying it just in regards to this project, but to all, particularly the outdoor projects.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll weigh in as well.
Supervisor Lavanino.
Believe it or not, I agree with everybody's position so far. They all make sense, and it's a balance. And so the projects like this one, for me, that are sited on nearly a 300-acre parcel and are developing 22 acres, 6 football fields away from the road as far as the view shed goes, and I have not met with the grower, but from all indications of looking at the Planning Commission meeting are folks that are responsive. I don't think this is the project that we drop the hammer on. And one of the concerns I have is, we say we don't want to put it all in one area, which I totally agree. But when we spread it out and we try to put it out in the hinterland, those folks then say, well, it shouldn't be out here in the middle of nowhere. We should put it, where it makes more sense. If somebody can circle that place on the map in this county, I would be the first one to back you up on that. I have not found that golden zone yet. And every place that seems to have to go is places where nobody wants it to be. So, I think on this particular one with a huge parcel, small development envelope inside that parcel, with 2 miles away from the city limit, we do have protections at the city, as far as odor control goes when it gets closer, when it's near a boundary line. So I like I said, I kind of agree with what everybody has said at this point, but I don't really think that this is the project to make an example out of.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam.
And I think that this is the reason that we need to revisit the PEIR. And I realize that's not going to occur for this project, but, and back to the no golden zone, that's right. But this is why I think that it's really important to get it right at some point, because we're kind of groping around in the dark here, because we didn't know what we didn't know to begin with, and now we're finding stuff out. And if we're locked in to repeating decisions that we've made in the past, like on Busy Bee, and I wasn't here for Busy Bee, and I'm sorry about that, because maybe things might have been different, but I'm not sure I had my ideas as fully fleshed out as today. But if we don't kind of get a new understanding with the industry, that they've got to make sure and not become a nuisance, because once we give somebody a permit to do what they're going to do, then if we don't make it so that they can't become a nuisance. Then if they become a nuisance, it's like, too bad. And that's not a good, I don't think that's a good message to send to your existing businesses and residents. And I think it's disrespectful at the very least to people who have made massive investments in your community already. And I think that we should do better than that. And I wish I could have been more helpful early on, but I didn't see it. And so, the best I can do is say today that I think that maybe a good thing for the applicant to do is to volunteer that they'll add that into the permit conditions, that they don't become a nuisance. And I think that this site just does lend itself to that because of, being out there yesterday really clarified my thinking on that project as opposed to some others. That I think that it does have, as Supervisor Lavanino is talking about, separation and a good preponderance of wind direction to result in a pretty happy relationship between the neighbors with that one. They're not always going to be that. There's a lot of times where people want to cite things that are really going to be confrontational and result in just a one use or the other is going to win result ultimately in those situations. And if we can get somebody to voluntarily indemnify the nuisance issue on the front end, maybe that becomes a better precedence going forward than just leaving it alone and saying, well, we've made our mistakes, we got to keep making them because we have to be consistent. So that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Mr. Gazzoni, do you have something to add?
Chair and Supervisors, to respond partially to the legal framework question that Supervisor Adam had within his comment, issuing a permit does not immunize a business or a grow from becoming a nuisance and being enforced against. So going back to the 30s, a lawful business may still become a nuisance by the manner in which it is operated. So that protection is out there. And my next thought on the 2-mile condition, which would be potentially volunteered, is that traditionally in this area, when we look at conditions, we like them to be set up in such a way that they're easy to objectively evaluate, or they can be objectively evaluated. So if we have don't be a nuisance within 2 miles, I think that would be hard on planning staff, but you may want to hear from the planning director on that.
Ms. Plowman.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think as we've learned in Carpinteria, there's no way to know where the odor is coming from. We cannot track which grow is the offender. So I think it would be very difficult to enforce on a particular grower with a condition of that nature.
All right, Supervisor Hartman.
Go ahead.
And Chair and Supervisors, and I think the other part, and we're talking about one particular permit application today that's before you, but when we go back to the structure of this, we've got really 2 parts, and that is the land use regime, whether it's a land use permit or a conditional use permit, and then CEQA. And a lot of the discussion that I'm hearing today about CEQA sounds partially like frustration with the land use regime of wishing that there was the condition that goes with conditional use permits about not being detrimental to the comfort, convenience, general welfare, health, and safety of the neighborhood, which is really more of a what type of permit applies to this parcel, more so than CEQA.
Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor Hartman.
Yes, I was going to ask if we have ever, despite all the complaints we've had about odor, enforced on a nuisance claim, And then I wanted to ask, given we can't identify where the odor is coming from, how we ever would enforce on a nuisance claim. And I think that's for you, Mr. Gazzoni.
Well, I think a nuisance claim, and when we've looked at these, working with the sheriff's office and with planning and development in the Carpinteria area, has been problematic in that no one could tell with any accuracy what parcel something was coming from. I think our ideal but non-existent facts would be there's only one grow in the area, and we can actually measure that. But odor strikes me as a hard thing to measure. There's been discussions by the sheriff's office of a tool that would, or in planning of a tool that would actually objectively measure this. I haven't seen that work yet.
Supervisor Williams.
I think I heard my name called just there. This is an issue for me. I mean, the board a year and a half ago directed County Counsel's office to initiate nuisance litigation against possible nuisances. And I understand the desire for a 95% or a 99% chance of success in enforcement. But the fact that have not initiated it, I think, is less of a deterrent than going for a 70% or 50-50 chance of successful enforcement. So, since I know this is a tangent to this particular appeal, but since the issue came up, I just think it's really important that since the non-conforming regime is not going away immediately, and these appeals are happening at a snail's pace, that we continue to look vigilantly for cases where we have some chance of success instead of overwhelming chance of success.
All right, so I think the board has identified concerns, and we have this outstanding language issue that staff still needs a little bit of time to refine. So we're going to take a break for 10 minutes and come back at 12:10.
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let the applicants know that we'll be reaching out to them. We'll be calling them to let them know how we've revised the condition language. We'll email it to them, and then we'll be able to put it up on a slide for the board and the public and the appellants to read.
Let's make it 12:15 since you have those extra steps involved.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll reconvene the Board of Supervisors meeting for October 6th. We're on departmental item number 3, and County Council and the planning staff have been working with the applicant about conditions. And where are we now?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so we do have a revised project description that the applicant has agreed to. It has been revised to read during 3 annual harvesting and planting periods, which will last approximately 2 weeks per harvest, no longer than 1 month per harvest. And then operating hours may be extended to include weekends and are proposed for between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then we've removed the language trying to identify exactly when those harvests would happen, because I think that presents an enforcement issue as well. And I think it'll make it simpler for the applicant to be consistent with and easier for us to monitor.
Okay. Well, thank you for that additional work and clarification. The matter is to the board. Mr. Gazzoni, did you want to add anything?
Chair and supervisors, and my recommendation working with planning would be that if this is the sense of where the board wants to go with this, that my recommendation would be to then trail the item so we could go to closed session, come back, and that would allow time to polish this up and tie in the CEQA findings and the recommended actions all in one spot.
Okay. Have Ms. Supervisor Hartman's Light is on.
So there's no movement whatsoever on odor control.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Hartman, the applicant did not propose anything or agree to anything.
Supervisor Williams, or did you have more, Supervisor Hartman?
Yes, while we're still on this, I heard Supervisor Williams say that he would not approve future projects to allow such concentration in such a limited area. And I would like to ask Mr. Gazzoni, what tools do we have under an LUP? Aren't we in just the same situation we are right now?
Chair and Supervisors, with a land use permit, the board has less discretion, and with a conditional use permit, the basic findings for a land use permit are the adequacy of services, conformity with the comprehensive plan, legally created lot, and in compliance with local laws, regulations, and rules. I think Supervisor Hartman's question alludes to the additional finding that goes with a conditional use permit, which is, quote, the proposed project will not be detrimental to the comfort, convenience, general welfare, health, and safety of the neighborhood and will be compatible with the surrounding area, end quote. And that really is the clearest tool available to prevent a concentration.
So I just want to reiterate, we keep saying, oh, we're going to deal with it. We do not have the tools to deal with it. And that is the issue.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Hartman, I wanted to add one thing to the conversation, and that is recently the board took action to set a threshold at which point a land use permit is allowed, and then above a certain percent of grow on a site, it was 51%, then you would require a CUP. And you should know that that is in effect, and it did result in changes in applications. So land use permits have been revised to reduce their grows to be in conformance with those new standards. So it did have an impact, the intended impact that the board had at that time. So I thought that was important for the board to know.
Thank you, Ms. Plowman.
Mr. Chair.
We're going to go in order just a second. Supervisor Adam, you're after Supervisor Williams, and Supervisor Hartman has the floor.
That's very helpful. What
Sure.
would be more helpful is to see an analysis of what that actually means.
Well, all these conversations can happen, and everybody can ask questions at any point in time of staff and get information about what is going on in the way of planning applications and their meetings with planning staff. Right now, we have an applicant in front of us today. Supervisor Williams.
Yeah, I think that 51%, I seem to remember I proposed that. I am committed to limiting, acreage to something more reasonable. I can completely empathize with feeling like your area in the district is the hot spot. That's the way I felt for a couple years. And so it makes you obviously very hyper vigilant on both sides often, sometimes, because you want to get this right. And so I very much empathize with that. I will continue to be okay with, even on an LUP, to ask applicants to revise to have better setbacks or more reasonable acreages. However, in this case, Castle Rock already has done that. And, 0.4 miles from the applicant, that's pretty far. So, I'm not sure that we could have ever come up with a setback that was more vigilant than that. And so with this revised description, I am comfortable with the project description and will deny the appeal and uphold the project.
Supervisor Adam.
Yeah, and I realize we're not going to do this today. In fact, we probably aren't going to do it while I'm on this board. But I really think you guys got to go back through this PEIR, because it doesn't address the issues that we've known, that we've discovered since we started doing this, and these issues of concentration, and you've got to come up with some way to evaluate and mitigate the damages to existing residential and commercial stuff in the area, uses in the area, and I don't know how you do that unless you start again not from scratch, but just go through this PEIR again and make sure that it puts in all the stuff we found out in the meantime. Because, the problem is we know all this stuff now, but we're not able to incorporate the mitigations for it because it's not in our history at this point of approving projects, and it's not, we don't have a mitigation strategy identified for it. So, I think the problem here is we're dealing with something that was a first impression, and I think everybody understands we might have done a little, I know that I will admit that I did a little too much, too fast, and, for that I'm sorry, but, I think that we have, as a board, an opportunity to fix that. We just have to choose to do that. We have to instruct staff to do that, and I'm hoping that you guys will do that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gazzardi.
Chair and Supervisors, just as a housekeeping item on this, I think it would probably save the board and the process any confusion later. We've got a proposed version of applicant's requested change to applicant's project description showing on the screen right now, and there's been discussions offline with the applicant on that, but I think it would avoid any confusion later if we heard briefly from the applicant that the applicant is requesting this change that's shown on the screen, and that way, if you trail the item, you're working off the applicant's statement on the record.
All right, let's just do that. We'll trail the item. The applicant will have time to review the proposed new conditions of approval, and then we'll go to the applicant when we come back after closed session and have their response to those new conditions and board deliberations, and the board can decide what to do at that point in time. So we're going to, Supervisor Hartman, you have another question?
Yes, I have an answer to my own question. Out of the 3 of 23 are over 51% in the current pipeline. So that means if you have 100 acres, you can have 51 of cannabis in hoops. This does not deal with the concentration problem. It is not a solution. So to claim that we have one and then woe and behold, the next time it comes forward, we have no tools, that's disingenuous.
Could staff refresh my memory? How many applications has this board considered in the San Ynez Valley? Has there been 4 hearings, 3 projects approved, and 1 withdrawn? Is that our 2020 action? I'm not talking about what's in the pipeline. I'm talking about the decisions that the board has made on applications in the San Ynez Valley. There's been a grand total of 3. 4. Does anybody know how many acres we're talking about?
Mr. Chair, I know that there was Busy Bee, West Coast, Santa Rita, and Castle Rock.
Yeah, so probably 60 acres approximately in the San Ynez Valley that have been approved by the board?
Busy Bee is around 22, Castle Rock's around 22,
60 some.
West Coast is 50.
Okay, so less than 100 acres so far approved by the board, and another project that was withdrawn from the applicant. So there's some more context to the conversation. All right, we're going to recess to closed session, and Mr. Gazzoni, could you please read the items for consideration?
Chair and Supervisors, today in closed session, the board is agendized to consider 2 matters. One case of existing litigation titled Kirsch et al. Versus County of Santa Barbara, which is a Superior Court case, and the second, conference with legal counsel about anticipated litigation, significant exposure to civil litigation. My estimate is that closed session will take approximately 45 minutes.
Okay. We will return to item number 3 when we return at approximately 1:45. Thank you. At 1:15. You're right, I did the math wrong. We're now reconvening the meeting of October 6, 2020. Would the County Council please report out from closed session?
Chair and Supervisors, today in closed session, the board considered 2 matters in conferences with legal counsel. The first was a matter of existing litigation, Kirsch et al. Versus County of Santa Barbara. The second was one matter of anticipated litigation, which was a significant exposure to civil litigation. There are no reportable actions.
Thank you, Mr. Gazzoni. We're going to return to item number 3, departmental item number 3. Ms. Plowman.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. So we've had a successful collaboration, and we have on the screen the revised project description language. And I think this is the opportune time actually, did the applicant verify? The applicant did verify that they accepted this.
My recommendation would be to hear from the applicant that, given the opportunity over the lunch break to look at this, that this is the revised project description that the applicant is requesting.
Okay.
Yes. So we're going to check
Sorry.
that box.
And then would you, Ms. Lair, please put up the revised recommended actions. So we've amended the recommended actions so it's clear that the board did approve some changes to the project description. And that's in recommended action B and recommended action C and D, so that it's clear that it went from 4 harvests to 3 harvests.
Thank you for that work over the closed session time period. We'll go to the applicant now to hear from, yes, Mr. Wright.
Chair Hart, fellow supervisors, this is Troy White, TW Land Planning Development, representing Castle Rock Family Farms 2 LLC. We've had an opportunity to review the applicant proposed revised changes to the project description, and as drafted and appearing before you from staff, and we have no objections to moving forward with those revisions.
Thank you very much. That is the new revised project description per the applicant, and the matter is back to the board. Is there any more discussion, or is there a motion? Supervisor Hartman.
Yeah, I have 2 points I'd like to make. There's much to be recommended about this project. It is a small percentage of the overall parcel. I don't think you can look at it as a percentage of the ranch as a whole, but the parcel, it's less than a quarter. It's not an illegal expansion of medical. The physical location is something of a bowl set back from Highway 246, and it's not highly visible, and it is insulated by vegetation somewhat from the river. The Planning Commission did have a 5-0 vote. And it worked really hard, I know, and I really appreciate the hard work by the Planning Commission to try to work with the applicants and bring these projects forward in a way that they may be more approvable by the board. This project does involve a local rancher landowner who's using cannabis as I think this board really intended when we wrote the ordinance, and that is to help existing agriculture stay in business and kind of a high value crop that can cushion through the ups and downs of the agricultural economy. So I'm very supportive of that, and but my vote, what I would like to do is have an analysis come back about the 51%, because here's what I have. That we have 102 acres approved in this area, 800 more in the pipeline. Those are 23 permits. Of those, only 3 are CUPs. So my hunch is that we don't have a tool to deal with concentration. The 51% isn't going to help us much. We're now, over 50% of the cap. I cannot sit here in good conscience and not continue to raise that issue. So I would like to ask for that analysis. I would like the board's approval if I need to make a motion for that before I would make a motion to approve this project.
I'm not sure how that's agendized for our discussion today. We have a land use permit ahead on our agenda. It's been noticed as such. I don't know how we can do that today. Mr. Guzani.
Chair and Supervisors, I think that although that Supervisor Hartman's request is not agendized, any supervisor or the board could request the staff to report back. And if that's what Supervisor Hartman is asking for, that's a matter that the board could consider, now or after the vote. It's your discretion, but you're asking staff to report back with particular information.
Mr. Chair.
Because of our 8-hour rule, I normally you would ask informational items, and you can as a supervisor. So I think it's within Supervisor Hartman's authority to ask for that. But if it's somehow violates the take too much time from staff unless other ones chime in, I support the idea that Supervisor Hartman should be able to have that analysis and that it should inform our future decisions. I feel like this project is in a decent lot and decent configuration to minimize the possibility of nuisance, and they have revised their project description to be more reasonable, and I think that should be rewarded.
Are there other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam.
Yeah, after we broke last time, I remembered something my dad used to say all the time, old Dick Adam from beyond the grave here. It's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It feels so good when you stop. This EIR has to be revisited. And I think that the acreage or the percent limitation to a CUP is a good start, but I think we need to do a further analysis of how, and maybe do some more studies about how odor moves and how far it can travel under kind of normal worst case scenarios, and see if we can come up with some rational way to mitigate these things and to be able to cite them in appropriate spots so that they don't harm existing businesses and residences. So, I think that that's something that needs to be done, and we're not going to be able to do it now, but maybe if we could get direction to staff to start that, or maybe you got to do it next year's budget. I don't know, but it needs to be done.
Any other comments? Supervisor Lavanino.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm kind of I'm trying to figure out exactly how to get to what Supervisor Hartman's asking for. It seems it's a reasonable request. I'm just not sure that this is the vehicle to get that done. It almost seems like it's another bite at the apple of changing the ordinance or looking to change the ordinance. And that needs to be noticed, and people that are affected on both sides need to know that we're discussing something like that. If this is just simple direction, but that simple direction then is going to light a fuse that is then going to return with, some implications that could drastically affect both sides of this issue. So I think it's a little bit of a tightrope walk on this. I'd feel more comfortable, even though, believe me, I don't want to have another, the more cannabis hearings, what Peter just said about hitting your head with a hammer, But I think the better vehicle for this would be to come back and agendize that and then have folks be able to speak on both sides of how they feel about that. I feel like we're discussing, and I feel for the applicant right now and the appellant, because we're not really addressing this issue. So their issue. I think we're all saying that, hey, this is a great project, but other projects might be a problem. Well, we're not dealing with other projects today. So I don't really know what the vehicle is to get done what it seems like maybe a majority of this board would like to do. I'm not even sure that there's 3 votes to get that done. But then again, like I said, it's not agendized today, so I kind of have difficulty. I'd just as soon get to the issue at hand.
Mr. Ghazzani?
Chair and supervisors, the board has a lot of discretion in this area as to how you want to handle this, but the Brown Act does allow the board, without it being agendized, to take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda, and I think that's what Supervisor Hartman is talking about.
Okay, well, let's have a motion of some sort. Maybe we should take care of the project that's before us, that's agendized, that people have commented on, that others have said is a worthwhile project. Maybe we should do that first, and then we can have other discussion after that. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I would move approval of the project as revised.
Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
No.
Mr. Lavanino?
Aye.
Chair Hart?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
And then Supervisor Hartman?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we ask staff or direct staff to do an analysis of how the over 51% tool requiring a CUP would affect concentration, would limit acreage in the Santa Ynez Valley, particularly Santa Rita Hills area. We just heard that nuisance actions aren't a tool. And so you pointed to this as a tool. So before we approve other projects, how effective, how much does this tool address the issue that I'm raising?
Supervisor Williams?
Well, I'll second, but I would ask that we not bring it back for hearing unless we determine some, changes that would be proposed from that. And, if I am allowed to Brown Act with you, I'd be happy to make sure it comes back to hearing at that time. Remember, any supervisor, we could ask for something in a board letter. So I would just say I would second it, but for now it should just be informational so that we can use it to sort of chew on what the right policy would be. And if it is causing applicants that are under the 51 already to read the handwriting on the wall and ask for a more realistic amount of acreage, that may be taking place too. And I think that should be part of the thing.
And if I may?
Supervisor
I have a question. The Brown Act, how can I partner on a specific project with Supervisor Williams, or is he forever connected to Supervisor Lavanino on this? How broadly do you read that?
Am I married to life for life?
So the short answer is no. Having talked about part of a topic once does not bind you to another supervisor as a in quotes Brown Act buddy forever. We really look at the facts of what's the contact been. But I think that for the particular issue, if we're talking about this 51%, that's something that you could talk about. And at the risk of making this more difficult for you, I'll tell you that you have a lot of latitude as to what you do today. Supervisor Williams is describing another prong, which would be the board providing a reference to staff for factual information, or you could direct staff to bring it back as an agendized item. It's your choice.
CEO Miyasato.
Mr. Chair.
Let's let CEO Miyasato go first.
Just one second. Supervisors, I was going to ask our director if she had any comments on that.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think we can put together a spreadsheet that shows how projects have been shifting since the adoption of the most recent amendments to the code. I think it's important to know that there are still projects in flux, and we don't know how they will change because they're still sitting with the applicant and they're tinkering and working on them. I don't think that's a difficult project for us. I'm happy to provide that to all the board members and have you review it, or I can bring it back at a hearing. But I think really that is the board's call, how you would like to receive it.
Well, I think the information is valuable. I'm sure all the board members would find that useful, and I don't know that we need to presume what the outcome of that is. I think that, do the work, get the information, share it with board members, and we'll see what board members want to do after that. We don't have to decide that today. Seems that's my view.
And I think the board could do this either through direction of the body itself or at the request of a supervisor requesting staff to provide this information. So far, you've had a request by a supervisor to provide the information.
Okay. How do we want to proceed? I think it's clear the staff is going to do the work and get it to the board.
My preference would be informational at this point, and not have another hearing, but just informational at this point.
Okay, we'll see. Step one. We don't need to go past that. All right, thank you for this. Mr.
And
Guzani?
with us, I know we had several people remotely, but Deputy County Counsel Brian Pettit was with us and helped us, including over the lunch break while the rest of us were in closed session.
Thanks everybody for working over lunch. Which brings us to department item number 4. Thank you, Ms. Plowman. Everybody else? We're okay? All right. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 4 into the record?
Chair Hart and members of the board, departmental item number 4 is from Human Resources. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding an amendment to the ordinance setting compensation and benefits for members of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors.
Good afternoon,
Welcome.
Chair Hart and members of the board. I am here today to introduce the first reading of an ordinance to amend the current county ordinance number 5090, which sets compensation and benefits for members of the Board of Supervisors. The Human Resources Department is recommending the following changes. Number 1, increase board member salaries by 3%, consistent with direction given by a previous board to tie compensation to the Consumer Price Index for urban areas, and to authorize future adjustments to board compensation tied to this same index up to a maximum of 3%. Our second recommendation is to increase the biweekly chair allowance by 3% from $71.18 biweekly to $73.32, and to authorize future adjustments to the biweekly chair allowance based on that same October Consumer Price Index, as is the basis for salary adjustments, and also capped at a maximum of 3%. Our third recommendation is to implement the third and final year of ongoing pension cost-sharing pickups of 0.83 for members of the board in classic or legacy retirement plans. This is the final pension cost-sharing pickup for a total pickup of 2.49% ongoing. Our fourth recommendation is to increase the county contribution by 5.3% for board members enrolled in and receiving county-sponsored health insurance. This is the same increase that all county employees enrolled in health insurance will receive in the 2021 plan year. Human Resources is also recommending to authorize future adjustments to the county contribution for board members for their health insurance to match the county contribution received by elected department heads effective in the first pay period of the calendar year. Our fifth recommendation is to decrease the biweekly automobile allowance paid to members of the board by $2 a pay period to $230 paid biweekly, which is the same amount that is currently received by elected department heads and is tied to IRS rates. Human Resources is also recommending to authorize future adjustments to the biweekly automobile allowance to match the automobile allowance received by other elected department heads, also effective in the first pay period of the calendar year.
Thank you, Ms. Jeffrey. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there questions of staff? Well, this is always challenging. Would any board members like to begin discussion?
Is there any public comment?
Actually, good question. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
Chair Hart and members of the board, we have no request to speak on this item.
Okay. Supervisor Hartman.
All right.
I would like to ask CEO Miyasato. I wasn't here, and I believe there was a study done, and the Santa Barbara County Board is compared to benchmark counties. Could you describe that?
Supervisor Hartman through the chair. So in 2015, the board asked for a ad hoc committee of community members to look at board salaries. And there was a committee that I was on with the then HR director, Jerry Muth. It had the Santa Barbara Chamber, it had the Lompoc Valley Chamber, it had a Montecito Bank, it had an HR professional, and then a few other people. It had Taxpayers Association, et cetera. And the idea was to look at the salaries because the issue was these are full-time jobs, and they wanted to make sure the salaries were set, that they were competitive. People who could work as supervisors could have a comparable salary. So after many, many meetings, the committee basically, the majority of the committee ended up saying that looking at the comparables of the other counties, they recommended that the board salary be placed at the median or 50th percentile of those comparables. Also in discussion was that many counties look at the Superior Court judges' salaries because that's set by the state, and look at some percentage of that salary to peg the board member salaries. So those recommendations were brought forward to the board at that time, and the board decided not to take that recommendation, but to instead adjust the board salaries by CPI, and the CPI was set basically to assist with budget. And so there was a, whatever we have in the board letter that said that's what the CPI is set, which CPI we look at. And that was what we continued to do. And for today, if we could, just to let the board members know, because it's been a long time, currently the state of California Superior Court judge, their salary set by the state is $214,000. The board salaries are $100,248. And the median of all the comparable counties, if you just look at the counties that we typically compare to, is $128,000.
May I follow on?
Yes, Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you. That is extremely helpful. I just want to say for myself, this job is a very demanding one with a lot of responsibilities that are very diverse. If you're somebody kind of was retired like me, I was, or if you have a business, or if you're independently wealthy, you could do this. But if you're trying to support a family, if this is your only means, this is not a huge compensation for the responsibilities of this job.
Supervisor Williams?
Well, I agree with that, and I will move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Adam?
Look, I'm just going to take my last opportunity to give my logic.
Wait a second, Supervisor Adam. I would like to substitute Supervisor-elect Nelson at this point to make this vote, if that's allowed.
I would too. Where the heck is he? You know, we got $480 million of deferred maintenance, and I think that's an undershot on that. And we got roughly $1 billion of unfunded liability to our pensions. And, you know, if a board of directors of a private company was that far underwater on pensions, or especially deferred maintenance, they would not be deserving a giant raise. And I think this raise is giant, but cumulatively, I mean, you would be, if you didn't have those things, you'd probably be worth $250,000 and $300 a year. I think that those numbers are supportable in an organization of this size that's well run. But, if you got that kind of, $1.5 billion of unfunded liability, I don't know that you can, with a $1 billion budget, I don't know that you can say that. So, and I hope during my tenure here to chip away at that difference, but it's only grown. So I have to vote no again.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Any other comments? For me personally, the raise at this moment in time, with the COVID pandemic and the issues others are facing, I'm not comfortable with that personally, but I understand that we are not overcompensated and that this has been a troubling, difficult thing for many boards over many years, and appreciate all the work that staff has done to provide a reasonable solution to it. Supervisor Williams, did you have something else? Okay. All right. Any other comments? Any questions? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Adam?
The last no.
Mr. Lavanino?
I don't think it's the last no. And I will vote no
Chair
as well.
Hart?
On this.
Okay.
Motion,
there you go.
Motion passes 3-2.
All right. That concludes our business. Actually, we do have one announcement, unfortunately, from Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The Board of Supervisors would like to close today's meeting in remembrance of Public Work employee Thomas Sherady. Thomas spent 13 years working with the Resource Recovery and Waste Management Division as a vital member of the Collection and Materials Management section. More specifically, he managed the county's valuable solid waste collection franchise agreements. In this role, he ensured county customers received excellent waste collection services through a wide range of programs. I had a number of personal experiences with him. One day at a Tanglewood cleanup we organized by my office, we had lots of people with high expectations, and we ran out of container space on a Saturday afternoon, and he quickly had 2 more bins delivered. Another was at a cleanup at the Ivy Community Center, and again, we had a large workforce, but the wrong size bin to handle the palm fronds, and so we needed new containers delivered, and again, Thomas did deliver. I remember him attending Ivy Community Network meetings during his lunch hour to explain the nuances of regulations governing the pickup of possibly abandoned items. Thomas was the quintessential public servant, taking his responsibilities to heart, listening intently, participating respectfully, digging deeply to the root of a problem, and actively seeking creative and responsive solutions tailored to community needs. Anything he touched had the hallmark of excellence. He was also a devoted father and family man. The Public Works Department and the county will miss his passion and inquiring mind, and our most comforting thoughts go out to his family at this time.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Supervisor Hartman. And we are adjourned in Mr. Sheridy's memory and also Mr. Harrow's memory. Our next meeting will be October 13th, 2020.